Jeremy, and this is going to be a national overview for Tzeentch, Pawns of the Infinite Puzzle. I'm playing a new game, the Slowest WAAAGH, where I am playing Tzeentch. So, gonna do a big, very in-depth overview for this nation. It is one of the nations in Sombre's Warhammer mod. The game that we're playing, Slowest WAAAGH, is entirely Sombre's Warhammer mod. A lot of the same people that played in the Slowest Blitz, minus a couple of faces, I believe, and plus a couple of faces, I believe. So really excited to get into this game. Sombre's Warhammer mod is, to date, probably the best Dominions mod in existence. I mean, from like a total conversion standpoint, maybe not from like a usefulness or singularly sought after kind of standpoint, but it's a beautiful mod. It's super gorgeous. The artwork is absolutely amazing. And a lot of the mechanics and the way that the factions, the nations, are represented in it is truly awesome. Cannot recommend the mod more. I think it is probably one of the most popular mods for Dominion, so I'm sure a lot of people are already playing it, but if you're not playing it, you really should. It's absolutely fantastic. Definitely give it a go. Anyways, we're going to play Tzeentch. This video is going to probably be way too long because I have every intention of going stupid in depth on this because it's a mod nation, right? So a lot of the mechanics are going to be very unfamiliar for people. There's a lot of little weird intricacies and interesting effects and things like that. So I'm gonna have timestamps down in the description for all of the various different things that we're going over: units, mechanics, commanders, summons, strategy, blah 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 blah. As always, I am not an expert Dominions player, which I believe I have proven time and time again. I've just played this game a lot, so I am okay. So, take anything that I say with a grain of salt, use your own judgment, and obviously I'm probably going to fuck up on some of the things that I say. I'll try to not be inaccurate, but inevitably I'm going to screw something up. So, anyways, we're going to start off just on this screen. We're just going to read all of the shit. We're going to move on to mechanics from there, special mechanics. All of the Sombre Warhammer nations have special mechanics. Each of them, some of them are shared between nations, depending on the close-knit nature of the factions and just the way that they're created. But most of them have very unique mechanics, so we're going to dive deep into those. We'll go over special summons and strategy, and hopefully wrap everything up in a very nice, I'm not going to say tight package, because this is going to be a long video. It's probably going to be like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm probably going to have to stitch this thing together. I don't think I can do this in a single sitting. Let's go. Introduction to Tzeentch. I'm going to read all this shit. Fast forward if you want to. I think it's really fucking cool, and I love that Sombre has put so much effort into this. So, Tzeentch is one of the 4 ruinous powers, the gods of chaos that draw strength from the darkest mortal emotions and drives. Tzeentch is known as the Changer of Ways, the Lord of Sorcery, or the Architect of Fate, for their domain is change, evolution, mutation, intrigue, ambition, knowledge, sorcery, destiny, lies, and trickery. Each of the ruinous powers seeks dominion over the realms of mortals and advantage over their siblings, for to them all life is but a game. Greatest in number of the followers of Tzeentch are the Marauders, hardened human warriors from the tribes that surround the Chaos Wastes, and are sometimes joined by ogres or trolls, drawn by the prospect of great reward. Above the Marauders in status are the Chaos Warriors, elite fighters blessed with martial prowess and physical strength, and the Chosen Warriors, who have garnered Tzeentch's direct attention. Commanding the followers of Tzeentch are champions, exalted heroes, and chaos lords, each of which seeks to someday ascend to immortality in the form of a daemon prince. Though most on this path were long ago fated by Tzeentch to die in battle or take a new form as a gibbering chaos spawn. Finally, the daemons of Tzeentch are the most direct and magical servants of the Lord of Sorcery, for they are the essence of Tzeentch made manifest and directed to play their part in the great game. God damn, I love Warhammer lore. Ugh! I've loved Warhammer for so long. I found like a Warhammer faction art book thing when I was like 12. Many moons ago, and I fell in love with it immediately. Alright, so Tzeentch, changer of ways, magic, lies, trickery, destiny, crazy magic shit. Opposite of Khorne, who hates magic. Whoops. So, national features. We are a race of humans with partial cold resistance, along with beasts of chaos. We prefer cold too. Military, exceptional heavy infantry and cavalry, and they are not fucking kidding about that. Medium infantry, some ranged weapons. Some troops and commanders can earn promotion or transfiguration. So that is one of the special mechanics of not only Tzeentch, but all of the Chaos factions, the 4 main Chaos factions plus Norska. So we'll go more in depth on that when we discuss the mechanics scenario. A lot of what we discuss in various portions are going to be like, hey, we'll have to discuss this more later because it fits into a different mold better. So, magic. Strong. I don't know that I remember ever seeing a faction have their magic be denoted as strong. Priests as weak or strong, yes, absolutely. But their magic as strong? No. I'm sure there are some vanilla factions that have that, but that just tripped me out the first time I saw it. And it's not fucking kidding. Their magic is very strong. Astral, fire, glamour, air, some blood, earth, water. It's all over the place. There's death is not mentioned in here. It's also in there. There is not a thing that Tzeentch can't get involved in naturally. Obviously, it's more difficult for some things. They are primarily astral, fire, glamour, air, but they can do all of the rest of it. If for no other reason than they've got a shit ton of astral. So nature also mixed in that bag. Death, nature, and water are difficult to break into, but not impossible, right? Priests, they are relatively weak. You're only ever going to get H2s from a recruitable standpoint. Daemons are weakened outside of your dominion. That is a big deal. Even if you don't intentionally focus on the daemons in this game, you're gonna get them passively. So you need to make sure that if you are going outside of your dominion and you're utilizing your daemons, they are going to be weaker. Now, they're pretty fucking strong inside your dominion. So them going outside of your dominion doesn't mean they're completely, absolutely shit. It's just something to keep in mind, right? And then very specifically, labs are destroyed outside of your dominion. So if you control a province and there is a lab in it and you don't have your dominion there, that lab is fucking gone. But that isn't necessarily a horrendous thing. We'll discuss that more in the special mechanics for Tzeentch itself. Mechanics: gather secrets to unlock gates in the capital for rewards. And we're going to have a whole big section where we discuss the special mechanics of Tzeentch, probably right after this introduction. So look forward to that. There's a whole lot going on there, and it's really cool shit. So, scales and blesses. Turmoil limit +4. Cold limit +1, and magic limit +1. So, and this is a chaos faction. These are the bad guys, the big bad guys, right? Along with 4 other big bad guys in this particular mod. And that's whether or not you want to argue about the other big bad fact. There's a lot of bad people in Warhammer. There's a lot of bad people. But chaos is chaos. They are not order, they are chaos. And you are locked into turmoil. There is not a you're gonna do about it, right? So limit is +4 on turmoil. You cannot, in the Pretender design screen, you cannot get above turmoil 2. I believe. So factor that in. Keep that in the back of your mind. You're gonna have to deal with that. It's not that big of a deal. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Cold +1, not really a big deal. They prefer cold too, so keep that in mind if you're trying to like min-max things. And then magic limit +1 because they're the Lord of Sorcery. They're the Architect of Fate, the Changer of Ways. They do magic. They are magic. So you got the magic. Make use of it, right? Buildings, standard sports, labs cost 700. So not a crazy situation there. Taking a look just at their, we'll go over a lot of their actual sites when we go through units and commanders and summons and special units and things like that. But for now, just their starting site, the Silver Tower and the first gate of the maze. So this is the Silver Tower. 2 Astral, 2 Fire, 1 Glamour. Gives you access to your cap-only recruits, the Exalted Hero, the Sorcerer Lord, the Chosen Warrior, and the Chosen Knight. These are your sacreds. These are your big mages. These lead into your big leaders. They're your big starting leaders and can become better leaders and better mages down the road. So, obviously, incredibly important. First gate of the maze is fucking nothing. So, this is tied to the special mechanics of Tzeentch, and I think this is actually probably a great time to switch over to talking about the special mechanics of Tzeentch. So this is the introduction done. Gonna jump over to special mechanics. This is probably going to be a transition. Alright, so this is the special mechanics section where we're gonna go through what the special mechanics in the mod for Tzeentch are. They got 3. They got the Path of the Warrior, the Path of the Champion, and Gates and Secrets. Path of the Warrior and Path of the Champion are shared with the other Chaos factions. So Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Norska, and Tzeentch all have Path of the Warrior and Path of the Champion. Okay? They're very simple, but they can have very big effects on your game and how everything plays out for you. I say very simple. I find them incredibly interesting, but they're not complex mechanics. Basically, it boils down to, with Path of the Warrior, your Chaos Warriors and Chaos Knights gain XP when they hit an XP threshold. I believe it's 45. They can be promoted, or they will be promoted. But what they're promoted into is the question mark, right? They won't change form until the turn after their promotion is announced. So you need to acquire enough experience. When you have acquired enough experience, on the turn that happens, you'll get a notification that these units have promotion, and they can't be promoted inside their home province. I think there's some jankiness with that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I've sat things just in a province and they promoted, so I don't think that that's necessarily true. Maybe there's some weird finicky portion of it. Anyways, when they promote, they have a chance, because it's fucking chaos. So again, all of the chaos factions do this. They all have this promotion mechanic. It's not just, oh yeah, it promotes, great. No, they have a chance to become either a chaos chosen, a chosen warrior, or a chosen knight, depending on if it's a warrior or a knight promoting, or a forsaken, or a Chaos Spawn. So you got 3 options, but really like 15 options because there's a bunch of different Chaos Spawns, right? None of these are necessary. Obviously, Chosen tend to be the thing that you would prefer, unless you're really interested in some of the greater Chaos Spawns, which are really good, right? But Chosen are the safe, good option for promotion, right? Especially if you're running a heavy Bless, they're going to be sacred, so having more of them tends to be really good, especially as Chosen Knights, which are amazing units, right? So, Chosen, Forsaken, Chaos Spawn. None of these are bad. The Forsaken are not bad. The Chaos Spawn, none of the Chaos Spawn are bad, whether they're lesser or greater. It's just different and maybe more difficult to use and maybe not as good as something like a Chosen Knight. So overall, really cool mechanic. 45 experience is not difficult to achieve, especially if you're rolling around actually battling. If you're expanding with Chaos Warriors, which is very easy to do and probably the go-to route for a lot of people, but if you're expanding with Chaos Warriors, you're gonna get some promotions, some mutations while you're expanding. It's definitely gonna happen. Probably towards the end of expansion, but definitely gonna happen, right? If you're not expanding with Chaos Warriors and you're just recruiting them later on down the road, going 45 turns can be... you might not get promotions that way, but if you utilize experience sites, you can create factories where you are putting in Chaos Warriors or Chaos Knights into the experience sites and just shitting out additional Chosen, Forsaken, or various Chaos Spawns. So it's a really, really cool mechanic, right? The kind of adjacent side of that is Path of the Champion, and that is that military commanders, specific military commanders, can also earn a promotion to gain a more powerful form. So this goes through various different scenarios. It starts with your aspiring champions, which are recruitable leaders very armored recruitable leaders that you can get out of any fort. And they will promote from an aspiring champion into an exalted hero, into a chaos lord, into a daemon prince. Every stage, they have a chance of it not going well and them turning into a chaos spawn, right? Though, 2 things about that. That is fairly rare, right? I've played a fair amount of not just Tzeentch, but most of the other Chaos factions, and it is a low chance to lose your commander, to have them turn into a Chaos spawn. And the flip side of that is that when they do turn into a Chaos spawn, it's normally one of the most powerful Chaos spawn. So it's a silver lining, because it's not exactly what you want, but it could be worse, right? Did my fucking... I haven't touched my mouse or keyboard in a while. The computer's like, I'm gonna go to sleep. So, that is a very interesting mechanic. It can fuck you if you are not paying attention. You do need to pay attention to the Path of the Champion. Path of the Warrior is something you can just kind of like mix and match your units and handle and deal with. It's nice. It gives you some interesting units to play around with between Forsaken and the Chaos Spawn. Can give you extra Chosen. It's just kind of like a nice bonus, interesting thing. Path of the Champion can give you extremely powerful units. Chaos Lords and Daemon Princes are extremely powerful units. But if you are leading things around, or you need someone to do a very specific thing, and they're about to promote, maybe rethink what you're doing, because it could... You could leave an entire army behind as this motherfucker promotes into a Chaos Spawn and can no longer lead troops. So keep that in mind, okay? The last thing is the biggest. So this is... Gates and Secrets is the unique mechanic for Tzeentch. No other faction has this mechanic. It's not shared with anyone else. It is uniquely Tzeentch. I'm going to read through this. It's gonna be, it's not gobbledygook, but it might not make very much sense to you unless you have already played Tzeentch. So after I read through this, I've got some graphics to show off, and hopefully they will explain things a little bit better, okay? So, gates and secrets. As you accumulate secrets, you will unlock gates, sites in your capital that will grant you a reward when first unlocked, and a reward each turn. Each turn, you are told how many more secrets are required to unlock the next gate. You get 1 secret per turn for each enemy province, temple, and lab in your dominion. You get 10 if you fully control a lab outside of your dominion, though the lab is destroyed in return. There are 9 gates. You can't unlock the 9th. You just get to the 9th. Okay? So, what does that mean? It means Dominion is incredibly important for Tzeentch. Dominion's important. The game is Dominions. It's important for everyone. Knowing when and how to control your Dominion with Tzeentch is incredibly, incredibly important for maximizing what you're going to get out of this mechanic. Most often, you're probably going to want to have a strong dominion and push that strong dominion. There are counterpoints for having low dominion and keeping your dominion isolated so that you can produce labs in territory you control that are then destroyed because other people's dominions are in that province, right? That can be a way that you can kind of just shoot through the gates and secrets, kind of like tech tree kind of concept. But that is extremely expensive and very risky because you will have a low dominion. It's much simpler the vast majority of the time to have a strong dominion, push your dominion, and get secrets passively every single turn from your dominion being in your neighbor's lands. Being able to get 1 secret, not only from a province, but from a temple and a lab is a big deal. Because if you have border forts, or if another faction has a fort on one of your borders, and they have that templed and labbed, if you can push your dominion into that location, you're going to get 3 secrets a turn out of that one province, much less any other province. So while the 10 for a lab destroyed sounds like a lot, passively, if you're controlling things and you're doing a really good job, you might be getting 15 or 20 a turn if you have your dominion in multiple people's provinces around you and you're touching temples and labs. So that's a very, very big thing. But all of that is just, again, kind of gobbledygook if you don't know what you're actually looking at. So let's actually look at some of the things. So this is, let me pull this open. Does this work? Ah, it's too big. In a momento, let me fix the screen. Okay, there we go. Bit of miscellaneous information that we don't actually need, but this is kind of like a better understanding of what you're getting out of the gates and secrets. So when you first kick up the game, you're going to get the explainer message, right? But after that, you're going to, every turn, you will get a notification telling you how many more secrets you need to unlock the next gate. So your first gate unlock is going to cost you 30 secrets. So again, you're going to need labs outside of your dominion, which will be destroyed, or you're going to need to push your dominion into enemy territory. And you'll get 1 for every enemy province, temple, and lab that your dominion is over. Okay? So once you have accumulated 30 secrets, the first gate is going to unlock, okay? When that happens, when you unlock any gate, you're going to get a reward. And the reward is randomized. You're going to get a bunch of gems and an item, okay? So a lot of times, I find a lot of times it's gems that are kind of like more particular to the nation. So Astral Fire and Glamour tend to be pretty common. Astral Fire, Glamour, and Air tend to be pretty common. And the magic items are really kind of like all over the place. Sometimes you'll get something that's decently nice. A lot of times it's just random gear, right? It's a nice scenario. You can't plan for it. You can't really like work around it or anything like that. It's just you get something great. But what you'll also get is the gate activation. So for the first gate, on the turn you unlock it, and then every single turn after that, your capital will receive 1d3 blue horrors. So that is a very interesting mechanic. So all of the demonic forces, they're demonic forces, so all of the free spawn forces that you get out of the secrets and the gates are going to be daemons. Keep that in mind. Daemons are weaker outside of your dominion. If you're going to be utilizing them in an offensive war, that's something that you need to keep in mind, right? So every turn after you unlock the first gate, you're going to get 1d3 blue horrors, and then that first gate of the maze is now unlocked, and it's going to turn into the second gate of the maze, which still doesn't do anything, but that's the next gate that you are unlocking. So 30 more secrets, and you're going to unlock the second gate. Second gate, again, you're going to get a random reward comprised primarily of gems and an item. And then that's going to upgrade from 1d3 blue horrors to 2d3 blue horrors. Now, what's a blue horror? What's a pink horror? What's all the rest of the stuff? We'll talk about that more specifically when we get into the special units, because there's a lot of special summons, the chaos spawn, etc., etc. So that will be after the unit overview, after the commander overview. We'll do a spells, basically, because that's all the spells are summoning for Tzeentch. So we'll do a special unit and chaos spawn kind of review. Okay? Just know that it's demonic free spawn that you're getting out of your capital every single turn. When you unlock the second gate, it'll turn into the third gate, and you will now also generate an Astral Pearl every single turn. As you progress, as you can see, the amount of secrets required to unlock the next gate is going to increase each time. And it gets pretty fucking high, right? So third gate, you will go down, and I don't really like this. I wish you kind of stayed at the 2d3 blue horrors rather than going down to 1d3 blue horrors. But the key is you're going to access pink horrors. Pink horrors are just better than blue horrors in every way. They're bigger, they have better stats, they have better attacks. They're just better across the board, right? So 1d3 pink horrors, and there is a 15% chance of your magic scale increasing by 1. This is just in your capital, right? This is a very low chance. I've played, again, a fair amount of Tzeentch, not only in multiplayer, but also in single player, and this does not happen very frequently. But it is something that you need to keep in mind. As you unlock the gates, your capital could become more and more magical, which isn't necessarily a bad thing until you get too high magic and that shit starts horror marking you. So you need to keep an eye out for it. If you do get a couple of random ones very early on, you probably need to vacate your capital and play around the concept that your capital is just producing shit to be taken away from. Fourth gate gives you Astral Pearl, 1 fire. Another 40 secrets, you get fourth gate unlocked. 1d3 blue horrors, 1d3 pink horrors, and 1 screamer every turn. 20% chance your magic scale will increase. You get Astral Fire and Glamour. Next is where it starts to get a big increase. So 60 secrets, 70 secrets, 80, and then 90 to get to the end. So the first one, depending on how much you are pushing your Dominion in the early game, which can really depend on, do you get in an early war? Does someone attack you? That type of situation. It can take you a long time to get those first 30 secrets. After that, though, especially if you are the aggressor in an early war and you are taking territory, remember, if you capture someone's province and they have a lab there, and your Dominion's not in it, that lab's getting destroyed and you're getting 10 secrets out of it. So the first gate can take a while to unlock. The second and third gate, typically, because you're fighting in the early and mid game, typically unlock pretty quickly after that. Getting through the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th gates can be very difficult unless you are prioritizing it. And that means either setting up a province or multiple provinces that you're intentionally sacrificing labs in because your Dominion's not in them, or really pushing your Dominion and getting a lot of secrets out of the fact that you are pushing your Dominion every single turn. So, but you start getting some really good shit here. So 5th gate is going to give you 3d3 blue horrors, 1d3 pink horrors, a screamer, and a 25% chance on magic scales, 2 astral pearls, 1 fire, 1 glamour. 6th gate, costing 70 secrets, is going to give you 3d3 blue horrors, 2d3 pink horrors, 1d3 screamers, and a flamer. So flamers are the highest tier unit you're going to get out of this free spawn, and they're pretty nasty. They are... Do they fly or do they hover? I think they just hover, but they have pretty good stats. They have multiple magical attacks and multiple magic ranged attacks that deal a pretty high amount of damage. Not like crazy, oh my god, this is insane amount of damage, but the fact that you can get one of them for free every single turn and then more every single turn is a pretty big deal. 7th gate gives you 2 astral, 2 fire, 1 glamour. 80 secrets, and you'll unlock the 7th gate, giving you 3d3 blue horrors, 2d3 pink horrors, 1d3 screamers, and then 1d3 flamers. And there's a 35% chance of increasing your magic. You get 2 across the board, and then 90 secrets later, you will unlock the final gate that you can unlock, giving you 3d3 blue horrors, 3d3 pink horrors, 1d3 screamers, 1d3 flamers, and a 50% chance of increasing your magic scales by 1, and then you'll get 3 astral, 2 fire, and 2 glamour. So that's the big package. Basically, as you can see, when you're getting into the end of this stuff, right into the 6th, 7th, and 8th gate, you're starting to get 10 to 20 free-spawned daemons every single turn, and all of these daemons have high health. Even the weakest ones, like blue horrors, have higher than human health, right? So they have high health. They have like undead style morale, like demonic morale, right? So hard to morale break. They have multiple magical attacks. I think every single attack that they have is magical. Maybe not all of them. I think the screamers have a non-magic attack. But multiple magical attacks, and typically, aside from the screamers, they all have magical ranged attacks. And the magical ranged attacks do like a soul burn or something like that. It's not like an auto kill, but it does like additional damage on top of it with like a magic check. So you can get a lot out of this. It's not pre-spawn nation amounts of free spawn, but it is free spawn that is strong and very useful, especially inside your Dominion. You're also getting a lot of gems because your capital produces, again, 2 astral, 2 fire. Is it 2 astral, 2 fire? I think it's 2 astral, 2 fire, 1 glamour, right? Where's the thing? Switch! Go check. 2 astral, 2 fire, 1 glamour, right? So you're getting 5 gems out of your cap from the very beginning. With the 8th gate unlocked, you're getting another 7 gems. So your capital becomes a 12 gem output, which is really good, right? Like, that's very strong. And that's forgetting that you're also getting an amount of gems, typically around like the 5 to 10 mark in gems, each time you unlock a gate, plus an item. Now, you can't count on those. They're going to happen, but you're not going to be able to, like, min-max of, oh, I know I'm going to get an X when I unlock this gate. So it's just kind of like whatever you get, but you get a lot out of doing this. This is not a mechanic that you want to completely ignore. However, I don't think it's a mechanic that should become your entire focus for the game. And that is because even when you get the 8th gate unlocked, even if you had the 8th gate unlocked on, like, turn 30, which would be all but, like, you'd have to be cheating in money and, like, spawning labs to have them explode to get the maximum amount of secrets every single turn, blah, 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 blah. Even if you had the 8th gate unlocked on turn 30, you're still not getting enough to just be your entire game plan, right? But you are getting enough that it matters, that you want to be getting secrets, you want to be trying to manage your dominion, and you want to be factoring in that idea, right? So very, very interesting mechanics. Path of the Warrior, Path of the Champion, Gates and Secrets. Really, really cool nation. I think now is the time that we actually start talking about the units themselves, though some of the units that we've talked about with the daemons specifically are going to show up in the special units, summons kind of situation. So let's jump over to units, shall we? All right, we're going to talk about Tzeentch units. Most of the factions in Sombre's Warhammer mod, there are a lot of units in this nation. I think that's pretty typical of most mod nations. I think that's pretty typical of most newer nations in even the vanilla game, though that's not always the case. But it tends to be the trend is Swiss Army knife, right? Like, there's more units so that you have more options for any given situation. I think it's pretty rare these days to see nations that only have like 5 or so units. I personally like that a nation has a lot of units, but that does mean that there's a lot to go through, especially in a nation like this that is in Sombre's mod, because there are often variations within the units themselves, which can complicate matters. So, jumping into the units, this is just going to be recruitable units. We're not going to talk about any of the special summons units. We'll do those next. And we're not going to talk about any of the... we're not going to talk about Chaos Spawn, right? Because there's a whole... Where's it at? There's a whole fucking list of those. We'll go over those specifically when we're going through the... special units section, okay? So just the regular units, kicking it off with Chaos Warhounds. So Chaos Warhounds are very interesting units. I'm pretty sure all 5 of the Chaos factions get access to their own variant of Chaos Warhound. I think most of them are like this, the generic one, and then they all have variations. So some very specific things to know about the Chaos Warhounds is that they're very cheap. They only cost one resource per turn, or per each of them, and they are limited recruitment. I don't know if they're limited recruitment for all of the Chaos factions, but they are for Tzeentch. So you can only get 10 of them per turn. They have very high map move and very high combat speed, but they are undisciplined units. They're also animals, which can be a big issue, especially in the mid to late game if you're running up against a nature nation or a nation that has a lot of astral type stuff. But they do have forest survival, wasteland survival, snow move, and inherent cold resistance. They also bite pretty decently hard. Like, they don't have any real defenses, so they get chopped to shit and back, but they do chomp, pretty chomp. So it's something to keep in mind. They are decently okay at patrolling. So you can only get 10 of them in a location, but you get them real cheap and they don't cost very much. So they're not horrendously bad patrol chaff, though there are better options depending on what magic you have access to, what your scales are, etc., etc. Now, importantly, the Chaos Warhounds have some variants. So, every time you recruit a Chaos Warhound, you have a chance for it to be a basic Chaos Warhound. You also have a chance for it to be a Chaos Mutant Warhound, which has slightly different stats. So the Chaos Mutant Warhounds typically have slightly better attack, and I believe they have slightly better protection, as well as slightly better magic resistance and morale, right? So that's pretty good across the board. Really, though, what you're getting out of them is not only do they have a bite on the front, they have such a cool fucking model. Not only do they have a bite on the front, they have a bite on the back. So they have a corrosive bite, which is magic, and piercing, which can be very useful, and it has a special corrosion effect, right? So corrosion, I believe, reduces the armor, the protection value of enemies, and this has an area of effect 1. So this can be surprisingly useful in the right situations, but it can be difficult to kind of like really make use of because they're undisciplined and they have low protection, etc., etc. The other variant that you can get is this Chaos Mutant Warhound, which has a better magic bite than the other two, right? It also is blind, but it's not affected by eye loss, blindness, or darkness. So its face has mutated, which gives it the more powerful magic bite, but it also gives it the blind status, which is pretty interesting. I believe these ones have slightly better protection, or better protection than all of the others, the same better magic resistance and morale, but these also have higher strength. So again, not something that is like crazy, oh my god, cool, but can be pretty useful. It's a nice little effect overall. Next up, we have the Marauder Hunter. Coming in at 12 gold, 6 resources, 7 recruitment points. You can mass these guys. They are decently cheap, but not the cheapest thing on the face of the planet. However, they're surprisingly good. If you just look at this and you're like, oh, I get a weak boy with a spear and a javelin. Yeah. Their stats aren't anything to write home about, but they're also not bad, right? Like they're average or slightly above average pretty much across the board. And this spear is not the greatest thing on the face of the planet, but 15 damage is better than 13 damage, which is what a lot of spears are. And this javelin actually hits for 14 fucking damage, which again is not the craziest thing on the face of the planet, but when you have 50 of these guys, they can actually do some work. I've fucked around with various different expansion options with Tzeentch, and you can just expand by mass producing Marauder Hunters. You get big old lines or boxes of them. They walk towards the enemy and they hurl a shit ton of javelins, and the enemy typically just dies at that point with a little bit of extra poking on the end. You do get a lot of attrition when this happens, but it's pretty interesting. Another cool thing about these guys is they feed themselves. They are not stealthy, so you can't really use them as like stealthy raiders or anything like that, but you can pillage with them. And they're ambidextrous, which is kind of whatever. I think this is something that I probably should have noted in the national overview screen, but it's mentioned up here, right? Like, humans with partial cold resistance. All of your units have cold resistance 5. All of them. I believe every single one of them has at least cold resistance 5. Yes. Also, the vast majority of your units have snow move. So, being a cold inherent nation, right? Wanting cold 2 and having a cold 1 limit means that snow move is actually super useful. Most of your units outside of like your Cav and your Chaos Warhounds don't have hide map move. You will still move to provinces a lot of the time because of the snow move factoring into things. So it's really quite nice. So these guys, not super crazy, but actually kind of decently useful. They're pretty good against a bunch of barbarians, or if someone tries to rush you with just like a mass of units, and those units aren't like elite tier units, they're just like a lot of bodies, like someone with scales, and they're like, I'm gonna mass produce from every fucking province that I can, and I'm just gonna send all of 500 things at someone. These guys, when mass, can actually deal very well. They trade very well with the whole javelin scenario against other low protection units. So something to keep in mind. Next up, we have the Marauder itself. Oh, this is something else to keep in mind about the Marauder Hunters. They have 1.3 patrol strength, which for 12 gold is pretty good, right? They cost 10 gold a year. They are better patrollers than the Chaos Warhounds. Chaos Warhounds are cheaper. They're, almost no resources, but they're recruitment limited. So if you need to shit out a bunch of guys for patrolling, and you want it to be good patrolling, and you don't want to spend gems on it, Marauder Hunters are actually probably your best bet in that particular regard. Next up are Marauders themselves. Really, really cool scenario. Marauders come in 4 different varieties. Every time you recruit a Marauder, you will get one of 4 options. Marauder with axe and shield, a Khopesh and shield, a halberd, or occasionally a Forsaken Marauder. So, right now we're looking at the Axe Boys. That's the base boy, is the Axe Boy. So 12 gold, 9 resources, 7 recruitment points. These guys are 12 map move, but again, they are snow move, so if you're moving around in snowy areas, oftentimes you will be able to move 2, but not always. Sometimes it happens, it depends, blah, 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 blah. So, Ambidextrous, Pillager, Wasteland Survival, Cold Resistance 5. These guys, Marauders, are fucking good. Marauders are fucking good. Holy shit. Marauders are actually quite nice. Now, they are not a Swiss Army knife. They're not going to beat every single situation. You grab 100 Marauders and send them against 10 supercharged, sacreds, and the Marauders get destroyed, and you're like, Jeremy, you said Marauders were great. Fuck you. Marauders are great if you're using them in the right situations. And the right situations are expanding, and fighting anything that isn't super elite tier. Even like these axes hit for 20 damage. They can chop up things with 18, like heavy cav. They can actually heavy cav, right? 12 HP, 13 protection with a 12 defense, 16 protection shield. They actually can, they don't always, but they can take a lance charge and then just start chopping up knights. They're really, really quite good. And this is just the axe version. So the other versions that you have, also, I didn't notate this when we were talking about the wolves, but this is 3 turns of this is 4 turns of wolf recruitment or warhound recruitment. So this is kind of an average of what you're looking at. It's not guaranteed. Sometimes you'll get a turn where you recruit 10 and you'll get like 8 of these chaos ones with the fucking tail, right? So it is a little random, but generally speaking, you're gonna get mostly the base chaos warhounds with a smaller amount, closer to like a third of the chaos mutant variants. Same thing with these Marauders, right? So you're mostly going to get Marauders with the Khopesh. They do not hit as hard as the Marauders with the axe, but I believe they have. What do they have? I believe they have nothing. They might just be the worst version. I don't remember. Maybe they are the worst version. No, they have a better helmet. That's what it is. Right. So they have the same total protection, but the Marauders with the Khopeshes have better helmets. Obviously, at the end of the day, you don't get to pick what you are getting. So you're mostly just mixing these. But if you've been recruiting a shit ton of Marauders for like several turns and you've got copious amounts of them, again, this is 4 turns from our cap. If you've got copious amounts of them, you can start making squads for specific reasons, right? And the Marauders with Khopeshes they're your arrow bait, right? Like if you can put them where you think archers are going to be firing, their helmet's very good. It's going to keep them protected. They have a decent shield, and they hit for 18. So it's not a 20 axe, but it's still pretty good, right? They're still going to do okay. So there's that. You have the Marauders with axes, which we have seen, which have a less good shield, but they hit harder with their axe. You have Marauders with halberds. So these are more your glass cannony boys in the fact that they have no shield, but they still have 13 protection. But they have a 25 damage piercing halberd. So that can be extremely useful for chopping up heavy infantry, or chopping up heavy cavalry, or chopping up sacreds that come at you that don't have like ethereal or mist form or some shit like that, right? Like as long as they can actually hit it, these guys can actually chew through a lot of different things, and that's without any sort of buffs on them themselves. So these guys quite good. If you are expanding with Marauders, which I think is one of the 2 main ways to expand is, well, maybe 3 main ways to expand is mass Chaos Warriors, mass Marauders, and then like various Knights are the 3 kind of main ways to expand. Massing Marauders, if you get to the point to where you have enough to where you can start splitting them up, having these guys, they do have slightly lower combat speed, slightly higher combat speed. Having these guys just behind some of your other guys can be really important to make sure that they don't get into combat first and all get killed before they can start doing their chopping. Because once they start chopping, it's pretty fucking good. They're very, very nice for, again, the fact that these guys cost 12 gold. 12 gold. 12 gold. 12 gold. 12 gold. They're great. They're great. And then, last but not least, you have a chance to get Forsaken Marauders. So you're going to mostly get Khopeshes and axes. You're going to get about a fourth of them will be the Marauders with halberds, and a little bit less than that will tend to be your Forsaken Marauders. So these guys just have better stats across the board than the other Marauders. They also come equipped with True Sight and Recuperation. They also have Berserker +1. They have a Trident, which hits almost as hard as the Halberd, and they have a Magic Claw attack, which can be very nice if you are dealing with something that you need magic attacks for, right? So it's not an extremely high damaging magic attack, but it can make the difference in the right situations. They also have just straight better protection out of the gate. So these guys are actually pretty good. If you're doing well and you're expanding well with Marauders, I do kind of recommend that you pull the Khopeshes and the axes and let them take the brunt of the damage, while letting the halberds and the Forsaken Marauders have kind of a safer time and be able to filter in afterwards. That's because if you're doing a lot of expanding with the Marauders, you're typically going to do fine. You're going to expand well. But when you get into that late early game or early mid game, having more of the Marauders with halberds or the Forsaken Marauders around because they didn't all die while you were expanding can be really, really nice to start fighting other people, because these two versions are just slightly better than the other two versions. Although, again, these Axe Boys, quite fucking good. Okay, so moving on from the Marauders, we have the Marauder Berserker. So this is a little more expensive, clocking in at 18 gold, 12 resources, and 11 recruitment points. There are no variants on this. This is what you see is what you get, right? So nothing is going to change out of this. This guy is 13 protection, 14 HP, so a little bit of an HP bump, which is kind of cool. Berserker 2 has a falchion and has an axe. If you need a blender, this is a blender, right? Now, the Marauders themselves, especially the Halberds and the Forsaken, will hit harder than the Marauder Berserkers will. Okay? And that is important to note. If you're going up against something like, some heavy cav that has like 20, 22 protection, going for those Marauders with halberds or the Forsaken Marauders can mean that you're not chipping into them, but you're over them to start with. And that can make a very big difference. If the specific amount of damage is not the issue, like hitting a certain protection threshold isn't the issue, but just dealing as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible, then the Marauder Berserker is your answer, right? Because these guys are going to be 6 attacks per square, at high damage, berserking, and they take buffs decently well, not crazy well, but decently well. These guys are pretty good, but they are niche. They're not your answer for every question. They are the answer specifically of, I've got to kill a bunch of things decently quickly, Marauder Berserker, right? If you're going up against someone who, like, is free spawning or is producing a lot of shit tier units or mid tier units that don't, they're just massing things, and you need to blender something, produce a shit ton of berserkers for 2 turns, and they will go to town. They're absolutely fantastic for that. Marauder Light Horseman. There's gotta be a lemon, a rotten egg, what's the word I'm looking for here? There's gotta be a meh? No, there's some word I'm looking for specifically. These guys are just whatever. They're Marauder horsemen. Cool. They're like light horse cavalry or horse cavalry archers or whatever they are, right? They don't have a bow. They have a javelin. The javelin is as good as the Marauder Hunter javelin, except they have worse precision, so it's not actually as good. Their lance is a light lance. It does do a charge bonus. They have strength 12. They have 15 defense. They cost 25 fucking gold, 17 resources, and 22 recruitment points. No. They're 1.7 patrol strength. So even if you were like, I really need something to patrol, not these guys. These guys are not great. Especially in comparison to what's up next. So I think these guys are kind of just I'm not really sure what to do with them on this roster. So if you discover something that you're like, actually, they're really, really good for this, the best for this, let me know, because these are the one thing on this roster that I'm just like, about. Next up, we have something that I think is actually amazing. And that is the Marauder Horse Archer. I say amazing. It's not like this unit is just like the greatest thing on the face of the planet, but pound for pound, when I've utilized these have kind of outperformed a lot of the time for what you expect them to do. 25 gold, 22 resources, 22 recruit. that is not insubstantial. That costs. So I wouldn't recommend just trying to mass these at the beginning of the game. But they do have some really good uses. First up, they have a composite bow. So range 40, 14 damage. This is a pretty decent bow. It's attached to 25 gold, so that's a lot to spend on a bow. So I can absolutely understand when someone is like, that's too much for arrows. Absolutely fucking not, right? My rebuttal to that is they come with a 20 damage falchion. So you get a good bow for 25 gold, as well as a 20 damage falchion. And 20 damage is nothing to fucking sneeze at, right? It's not a lance, so they have, like repel issues and things like that. But they are still a mounted unit, right? So they still get an extra hoof attack. They have decent-ish defense, not great, but decent-ish defense, decent-ish protection. Overall, when I have used these guys, they severely overperform from what I had expected against low and mid-tier units. They will, of course, die against elite units. Of course, absolutely. They've got nothing going for them that's just saying, hey, this is magically going to stand up to some super sacred. That being said, they do hit for 20 damage. So there are moments where 20 or 30 of these guys run into some sacreds, and those sacreds are killing the shit out of them when all of a sudden one of these boys goes bop and does 20 damage, and then things change.
Bop, bop!
Bop, bop! Ooh, I got a frozen custard! Thank you, Mappa. So, anyways, very, very useful unit. It's really your only real ranged unit that you can just straight recruit. And it's a good bow, right? So, if you have some sort of play, for example, flaming arrows that you really want to make use of, these guys are expensive, but they are kind of like a quality archer, right? So composite bow, going to be very good. Half of strength added, so you're getting an additional 6 damage, right? So that's pretty good, right? Half of wielder strength added. Yeah, so it's an 8 damage bow. You get 14. If you Strength of Giants them, they're going to go up to 16. So that's pretty good. And then if you also Flaming Arrows them, you're getting another 8 for the fire, right? So these guys can do pretty decent. And then attached to a 20 damage falchion, they're quite good, right? Next, we get into some of the more elite tier units. First off is the Chaos Warrior. And so this is one of the special mechanics of Tzeentch and of the Chaos factions in general. All of the 5 Chaos factions have their own specially designed Chaos Warriors, but all of them are tanks. They all have stupid high protection. So 22 protection out of the fucking gate. These guys are pricey, 30 gold, 31 resources, 16 recruitment points. It can be hard to get enough of them going depending on your scales. If you go a heavy bless and you can't afford resources, it can be very challenging to get enough of these guys early on to use them. But if you go scales and you have a bunch of resources, right? You have protection, etc., and you have plenty of gold, you can start turn 1 and turn 2 just shitting these guys out. Not shitting them out, but producing a fair amount of them, and you can expand straight up with Chaos Warriors without issue. So these are one of, I would say, the good expansion strategies, and also just good, period. 22 protection is nothing to stuff at, especially with 2 natural protection. So when you throw something like Arbal Warriors on these guys shoot up to, I think, 29 protection, which is pretty fucking good. So yeah, they promote at 45 experience, they have a Khopesh, and they come in 2 variants. So, taking a look at it, every time you recruit one, you are either going to get the Khopesh with the Kite Shield variant, which is pretty decent, right? Or you are going to get the Halberd variant. They are still 22 protection. They still have 15 HP. They still slap, but now they have a 26 damage halberd. So, if you've got the resources for it, Chaos Warriors are absolutely amazing. Other thing that I wanted to just kind of like throw out there is again, if you're expanding with them, you absolutely will hit this 45 experience threshold while you're expanding. And so you'll get some promotions. That can complicate things because the Chaos Warriors are 8 combat speed and 10 combat speed, depending on Kite Shield or Halberd. But the Forsaken are 12 combat speed, and then the Chaos Spawn are all over the place with their combat speed. Mostly they are faster. So it can complicate things if you have like a unit of 10 Chaos Warriors rolling around. It can complicate things to have some of them promote into Chosen, into Forsaken, into Chaos Spawn, and then you've got this little expansion party of multiple different combat speeds, and if you try to break them up, probably won't have a commander that has enough leadership for that many squads, and it can turn into kind of a kerfuffle with matching up the combat speeds and losing morale because of the over leader scenario. So it's something to watch out for. Splitting up the 8 combat speed and the 10 combat speed guys can be very useful or very important. And yeah, so it's just something to keep in mind, right? Other things to note about the Chaos Warriors is that they have decently high morale, but not crazy high morale. They have decently high magic resistance, but not crazy high magic resistance. They do not need to eat. They can't starve. So that's really, really nice, especially when fighting against something like Nehekara or the vampires or who's the other big death nation? I forgot him. Nagash Azar, right? So if you're playing, presumably if you're playing within Sombre's Warhammer mod, right? And you need units that aren't gonna just die in no population, Chaos Warriors absolutely fit the bill. They also have True Sight baked into the unit. So really, really good, fantastic unit. You do need to be careful about when they're promoting and how you manage those. I suppose let's actually take a look at one of the promotions. So obviously, one of the things they can promote into is the Chosen Warrior, and we'll go into those more in depth here in a second. But the other thing they can promote into is this, is the Forsaken Warrior. So these guys are interesting, and they're a side/downgrade, right? They are faster, both in combat speed and map move. But they have 13 protection versus the 22 protection. That's obviously the big deal. They do have more HP. They do still have True Sight. They have Berserker 1, and they have this Living Halberd. So this is kind of like this is what makes it the side grade rather than the downgrade, is the combination of the Living Halberd and Berserking, right? Is this Living Halberd hits pretty fucking hard, 25 damage, and is a magic weapon, whereas the Chaos Warriors don't have inherent magic weapons, right? The Living Halberd is a magic weapon, and it does a extra 8 fire armor piercing damage on a hit. So that is pretty cool. It can be pretty useful, but it's still generally like a side downgrade to the Chaos Warriors themselves. And then, of course, aside from the Chosen or Forsaken. Every time a Chaos Warrior promotes, it can promote into any of these Chaos Spawn. We'll go over all of the Chaos Spawn later. So that is Chaos Warriors. They are a big part of all of the Chaos factions. So, of course, they're going to be a big part of Tzeentch. Aside from them, and I think this is the same for all of the Chaos factions, have a Ogre variant. They all have their own Chaos Warriors. They all have their own Ogre variant. They all have their own Troll variant. They all have their own Chaos Knight variant. And then they all have their Chosen Warriors and Chosen Knights. So, jumping into things, we have the Chaos Warrior or Chaos Ogre, slightly more expensive than the Chaos Warriors, both in gold resources, but not recruitment points. So if recruitment points are an issue and the others are not, you can pump these guys out. They are pretty good. They have very high HP. They have 2 attacks. They are size 5, so you're only going to get 4 attacks per square. But versus the Chaos Warriors, who are only getting 3 attacks per square, that's an upgrade, right? 18 protection is good, but not the 22 of the Chaos Warriors. They have Dark Vision 20, so that can be useful, but they are gluttons. So these are situationally good. If you need thick bodies that hit hard and a decent number of attacks per square, and resources and gold are less of an issue than recruitment points, these guys can actually be quite good. I think they do very well in the late game when you have a bunch of buffs to throw on them. It gets, I think, to the point in the late game where if resources and gold aren't an issue for you later on, and you're not using like Chaos Warrior factories where you have like sites where you're gaining experience on the Chaos Warriors, then when you're doing mass battlefield buffs, the Chaos Ogres can often be kind of like an overall better receiver for those buffs, if for no other reason than the fact that they have double the HP of the Chaos Warriors. Flip side, though, is they don't have as good magic resistance or morale as the Chaos Warriors, but that can be adjusted based off of items and spells, as well as whether you have drain or magic going on in the dominion that you're currently in. So something to keep in mind. Next up is the Chaos Trolls. These guys are fucking expensive. Again, all the Chaos factions have their own version of Chaos Trolls. The Tzeentch version is kind of neat in that it does not have fire vulnerability. So it instead has cold resistance 5, and its regeneration is lessened because of its fire, not resistance, but the fact that it's not vulnerable. So instead of having higher regeneration and vulnerability to fire, the Tzeentch Chaos Trolls just have lower regeneration. That's a side grade, but it really depends on what you're dealing with and how you're going about it, right? These guys are very expensive, but they cost almost no resources. 37 HP. They don't have good defensive stats, but they have a lot of HP and they have regeneration, so that can really make the difference. The true thing is that they're size 5, so you fit 2 of them in a square, and they have a bajillion attacks. So they have a Bite, a Spike Club, a Kopesh, and a chance to Troll Vomit, right? So this doesn't have it every single time, it's just a chance. So they have between 6 and 8 attacks per square, and one of those attacks is one of the attacks that has a chance to exist is an AoE 1, right? So very, very interesting unit. They are combat speed 16, and of course the biggest thing is they're limited to 2 recruitment per turn. So that complicates things. They're very expensive for the early game. 50 gold is very expensive for a non-sacred unit, right? So they're very expensive for the early game, and being limited to 2 recruitment per turn often means you kind of have to have multiple turns of recruitment for them to be able to get like a little squad of them to do something with. That's not to say that they're not useful in the early game, But they're a very niche specific purpose in the early game. Kind of in the mid game, if you're doing really well on gold, and you can mass them, if you start producing 2 of them per turn in basically every fort, and you have, say, 4 or 5 forts, and then you consolidate them, you can put together a pretty scary force of Chaos Trolls pretty quickly. The downside is this. They cost 50 gold per turn. They cost 40 gold a year. That is more than the Chaos Warrior. That is more than the Chosen Knight, the 120 gold Chosen Knight. So, if you do not have a good income, and you're not paying attention to your income, be careful about mass producing these guys, because the amount of upkeep they cost can be surprisingly painful pretty quickly when you're not paying attention to them. I've had a couple of games in single player where I tried to make a concerted effort to use them, and I wasn't paying attention, and I set recruitment on for probably about 4 or 5 turns, and ended up with a group across several forts of about 50 of these Chaos Trolls, and I had been doing great from an economy standpoint, and then I was not doing great from an economy standpoint all of a sudden. So this is definitely something to keep in mind. They are, again, they're trolls, so they have recuperation, they're gluttons, they have dark vision, they have regeneration. They're very useful in the right situation. Just don't go crazy with them without a reason, Next up, we have the Chaos Knights. So, Chaos factions. Classically, Chaos Warriors, Chaos Knights, Chosen Warriors, Chosen Knights. These guys are a big fucking deal. Just like the Chaos Warriors, they promote at 45 experience, and they promote into the same things, except instead of a Chosen Warrior, they promote into a Chosen Knight. So these guys are 80 gold, 59 resources, 36 recruitment points. They're fucking expensive. These are very pricey units, especially from a resource and gold standpoint. It is very difficult to mass these, even with scales. It is very difficult to get any real amount of these in the early game. Even just doing like flat scales, expanding as quickly as possible, it's hard to get to the point to where you're producing 5 of these a turn in the early game, right? Because 59 resources is no fucking joke, right? So that being said, they are still very good. That is a 21 protection Chaos Steed with 25 HP. It hits for 16 damage, 22 protection on the Knight itself with 15 defense, 13 magic resistance, 14 morale, 15 HP, and they have a heavy lance, right? So this thing hits really hard. It is generally going to kill the ever-loving fucking shit out of whatever it hits that first time. When you think of the issue of heavy cav lance charges, this is that, right? That being said, while heavy cav is awesome, especially against smart players, lance catchers exist for a reason. Because if you throw a couple of really shitty cheap bodies in front of 10 of these Chaos Knights, yeah, these Chaos Knights are going to obliterate those things, but then their lance is gone, and they're stuck with a 19 damage Khopesh. And a 19 damage Khopesh, 2 19 damage Khopeshes, and 2 16 damage hoof attacks per square for 160 gold is rough, right? So these are not the end-all be-all concepts. They can be good in expansion. They are great in expansion if you can get enough of them to not get completely surrounded, and don't throw them into a shit ton of barbarians, because the barbarians will still kill them, right? But be careful when relying upon them against other players, right? Because other players are often smart enough to use lance catchers, and while you're gonna obliterate whatever hits that lance hits, that's it, right? After that, you gotta Kopesh and you gotta fucking hoof attack. And I know I was praising the Kopeshes earlier, but that's for the price point that you're getting them at. At 80 gold, this Kopesh is not it, right? So keep that in mind. Use them when you need to use them. And I think very specifically, if you have a big bless that is designed for your chosen knights, obviously you want to use these guys because you want to try to promote them into your chosen knights. And if you have a factory, a chaos factory, i.e. a site that gives experience per turn, put chaos knights in it. Yeah, 100%. Put chaos knights in it. Have them be turned into chosen knights. Chosen knights are absolutely fucking amazing. So, speaking of which, let's talk about the 2 sacreds that can only be recruited in your capital. Chosen warriors, chosen knights. Great, fantastic. Chosen warriors, 65 gold, 34 resources, 22 recruitment points. Requires friendly dominion strength 5 or more to recruit. If you are going to do some sort of bless and you need your sacreds early, you plan to use them to expand or something like that, you're probably going to already have good dominion because you're probably going to want many of them, but you have to make sure that you have the appropriate dominion or you cannot recruit them at all. Okay, so keep that in mind. These guys, much like the Chaos Warriors, they come with 22 protection, which is pretty good. They have elevated stats compared to the Chaos Warriors. Better magic resistance, better morale. I would say their magic resistance is actually pretty fucking good for the style of sacred that they are. Again, like all of the Chaos whatevers, they do not need to eat, and they have cold resistance as per Tzeentch. They have a falchion that is 22 damage. It is not magic. That is important. You need to know that, right? But they do have a ranged attack where they throw fire. This does not have ammunition. They can continue to just kind of throw this fire throughout a battle. It doesn't do that much damage on the initial hit, nor on the secondary hit, but it is 2 different hits of damage, okay? So keep that in mind. That can be very useful. Having a line of 50 of these march forward and then throw fire into the face of the enemy is pretty fucking good, even without a bless, right? These are very, very useful sacreds, even without a bless. Probably get them. Unless you're getting chosen knights. You guys are so expensive. Alright, they're 120 gold. Other than that, they're the same price as the Chaos Knights, I believe, right? 59 resources, 36 recruitment points. 22 protection, same as the Chaos Knights, Chaos Warriors, Chosen Warriors. Good magic resistance, good-ish morale, good defense skill, unlike the Chaos Knights, who actually don't really have very good defense skill. They are... you have to have 6+ dominion to be able to recruit them. These guys are almost impossible to mass at the beginning of the game. Turn 1, 2, and 3, you're going to get 2 or 3 of them, right? That being said, if you go a bless that you're intending on utilizing them for, and you get them going, they are going to blender absolutely fucking everything in existence. More often than not, what you will need to worry about is their commander, whoever is leading them, getting killed before they get killed the vast majority of the time. And they don't hit like trucks, but they do hit hard because of the effects of their weapons. Now, the Fire Lance is a heavy lance, so it does hit very, very hard. And it also has the Soul Scorch or Cast Fire and Soul Scorch effects. So getting hit with this means you are going to take damage in the face, and there is going to be a fire damage, and there is going to be a Soul Scorch damage that can be resisted from magic resistance, right? So this slaps, right? This is actually quite good. And then aside from their Fire Lance, they have a Fire Sword that does much the same thing. Now, I do think specifically, like, the Fire and the Soul Scorch are just the target that got hit. So you're not, like, doing AoE with these Fire Swords, or the Fire Lances. So that is important to note. But it can make obliterating whatever you are hitting that much easier. Also, these Chaos Steeds hit for 17 damage instead of 16 damage, so that's nice. And they look really, really, really fucking cool. So, Chaos or Chosen Knights specifically are extremely powerful sacreds that are very, very costly. So, if you want to build around them, do so. Even if you don't build a bless around them, if you go full scales with Tzeentch, which isn't bad, if you do that, they're very good to get kind of in that middle of the game kind of scenario when you're starting to get to the point where you have a lot of money. These guys are great because they're going to take all of the buffs exceptionally well, right? So that is something to keep in mind. They're really, really good units, but they are extremely pricey. So be careful what you have to give up in order to afford them / have them have a bless / whatever, you know? So, and that's the units. That's all of the basic units of Tzeentch. That was 50 fucking minutes, my god. Alright, we're gonna talk about special units in the next section of the video. Alright, we're going to talk about the special units for Tzeentch in this section of the video. So, the special units for Tzeentch are comprised primarily of two different classes, not primarily, entirely of two different classes. You have your Daemons, which have the effect of being pretty strong, counting as demons, and being weaker outside of your dominion. And then you have the Chaos Spawn, which are available through failed, quote-unquote, promotions of your Chaos Warriors and Knights. They do not count as demons. They do not get weaker outside of your dominion. They are led as normal troops, okay? So that's something to keep in mind, right? You can see all of these different units on the Tzeentch screen. I love how Sombre has done this, putting in these little sites that allow you to see all of the different things. So the things we're going to talk about are the Blue Horrors, Pink Horrors, Flamers, and Screamers. We're going to leave the Herald of Tzeentch, Daemon Prince, and Lord of Change for the Commander section. And we're also going to discuss the Chaos Spawn. There's a lot of them. It's bleh, right? But before we actually dive into them, let's actually look how you can get them. So the Blue Horrors, the Pink Horrors, the Screamers, and the Flamers, you can get from the gates in your capital as you unlock them, as we saw in the special mechanics section of the video, or you can spend gems in the conjuration tree to summon them, right? Every single one of them has two variants. They have the lower variant and then they have the higher variant. The higher variant is always more gem efficient, though it does obviously take more gems, which can be a pain in the ass, and it takes a higher level caster, which typically means utilizing one of your Chaos Lords or a Sorcerer Lord that has the right gear or the right randoms, right? So, starting off, you have Blue Horror Trios. You're going to pay 3 fire for 3 Blue Horrors, 1-to-1 ratio. Blue Horrors aren't especially good, but you do get this really early. So, there are situations where it might be useful to try to pump up your numbers to deal with some sort of rush or something like that, right? The issue is that Blue Horrors aren't extremely good, so there's a limited number of things that they could even handle if you were summoning them. But it's an option, right? You also have the Chaos Spawn. There is Chaos Spawn, Chaos Spawn Cavalcade, and then a Create Chaos Spawn, which is a Blood variant. We'll talk about those. We'll circle back around when we actually talk about the Chaos Spawn. So jumping up to Conjuration 4, which I think is really interesting. You actually have Flamer access at Conjuration 4, which is earlier than one might expect. And it seems a little strange that the Pink Horrors are also at 4, whereas the Screamer is at 5, right? So some potential interesting like locations and skipping level 3. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'm sure Sombre has an opinion or a thought process, whereas to the overall effectiveness of the individual units themselves, right? So summon Peak Horror pair. So you're not going to get 3, you're going to get 2 for 4 Astral Pearls. You have Flamer, you will get 1 Flamer at 4 Fire Gems. At Conjuration 5, you get both Screamers and Blue Horror Tide. Blue Horror Tide, significantly more useful, because it is much more gem efficient, and getting 15 Blue Horrors is not horrendous. I mean, getting 15 Blue Horrors is quite good. Again, the issue is what are they actually going to deal with? If you find yourself being overwhelmed by a crazy amount of, like, relatively weak or mid-tier chaff, right? Units that can effectively be killed without, like, crazy high damage, summoning a Blue Horror Tide is actually not a horrendous idea. If you've got the gems and you've got the paths for it, it can work, right? So pretty interesting situation there. Screamer, you only get a single Screamer for 3 air gems, but it's not the most difficult thing to cast. You can just have a sorcerer doing this, and if you get Conjuration 5 relatively early, it's kind of like Storm Demons, right? Like the Storm Demon variant where you're just getting 1 Storm Demon per turn. Yeah, you're only getting 1 per turn, but if you do it with like 2 or 3 of these guys, you can suddenly have 15 or 20 Screamers at a point in the game where your opponent might not be able to effectively deal with it. So this is pretty useful, as is the Flamer, right? So Flamers and Screamers, significantly more useful, I think, than Blue Horrors or Pink Horrors. Pink Horrors are pretty good, though. It's just both Fire, Air, and Astral might be a little difficult to throw around in the early game when you're potentially going to be needing these, and later on, you're probably going to be more interested in the upgraded version. So moving on from there, again, we're going to skip the things that we're not discussing yet. Moving on from there, at 6, you get Pink Horror Tide. This is more difficult to cast. This is probably only going to be cast by your Sorcerer Lords, which, those are slow to recruit cap-only mages. So that is taking away from what you could potentially be doing. Otherwise, they do cost 18 Astral Pearls, which is pretty fucking steep. But you're going to get 12 Pink Horrors out of them. Pink Horrors are pretty solid. Flamer Trio at 7, and School of Screamers at 7. So this is where you cap out on summons. So Flamer Trio, 9 fire for 3 Flamers is actually pretty good. This is also still pretty easy to cast for several of your mages. And Flamers are strong. They have a lot of attacks. They deal very well with a lot of different things. They take buffs pretty well. I think this is probably one of the better gem dumps that you can utilize for this nation. Only getting 3 still isn't a lot, but it is something, right? School of Screamers, you get 6 Screamers for 15 air gems. Again, a better price. Still relatively difficult to cast. Still probably only being done by your Sorcerer Lords, but still an option. Pretty decent stuff. I think obviously, right, like I think late mid-game and early late game, doing a bunch of Flamer Trio spam and School of Screamer spam, totally doable, depending on your income, obviously. And the issue is depending on what you're trying to do, your fire gems might very well be going towards something else, like Daemon Prince, right? So you might not make a lot of use of this, but I think there is merit in the utilization of them if you have the opportunity. Other ones that I think are really good specifically, I think the Screamer at level 5 can be quite good if you get a couple of those. Like, you have a plan for them, right? Like, you have, okay, I've won my first war, and I'm going for a quick second war target. I'm going to spend 2 or 3 turns summoning up a bunch of Screamers, dumping my air gems into a bunch of Screamers, and with those Screamers, I'm going to buff them with a couple of, like, point buff type scenarios, and I'm going to utilize them to screw over my enemy, right? Really, really easy kind of scenario there. And I think Flamers have the ability to, again, kind of a very similar situation to the anti-rush concept. Flamers can actually do a pretty good job. Depending, again, on what they're up against, they can handle much more elite units than horrors can. They're still not going to take down, like, the craziest things, though. But they can definitely help, and it can be surprising to have, 6 to 10 of these guys all of a sudden in the early game, right? Like, around, like, turn 20-25, when someone isn't necessarily expecting it. And it's really easy to get to Conjuration 4. Right? So I think the Summon Flamer, Summon Screamer, and then obviously the later ones of Flamer Trio and School of Screamers are pretty good and have very, very good situational usefulness. So let's actually take a look at them. Probably should have looked at them first. What am I doing? So we got Blue Horrors here, right? You are not getting a crazy amount out of these guys, right? Keep in mind that these stats will be lowered outside of your dominion. They are demons, so they are free. They're not going to cost you any upkeep as you have them. All of them are going to come, all of the different daemon varieties, I believe, are going to come with some level of invulnerability. 12 for the Blue Horrors. You're going to get some fire resistance, cold resistance, and decent poison resistance. They don't eat. They all have snow move. They're all demons. They all have recuperation. They all have dark vision and true sight. Okay? So, all useful. They all also have magic attacks. So, this is kind of where it comes in on the concept. I have an ant on me. This is where it comes into the concept of this can be useful in situations. It is a low damage magic attack, but it is a magic attack nonetheless. In the claw, and then they have the cast blue fire. So this has a low range 20, almost like a javelin, basically, right? But it has multiple attacks, so it shoots 2 every cast. It doesn't have ammunition, so they can just continue to use it. They will use it in melee as well. And it has both the initial fire damage component as well as an additional armor piercing magic resistance component tacked onto it. So it's pretty cool. Like, it's a nice little situation. Quite useful, but not super effective. It doesn't do the craziest amount of damage. And really, these guys are massable chaff, right? Getting 3d3 of them out of your 8th gate and being able to summon a bunch at any given pinch is useful. Mostly, though, I unless you have some specific purpose for them, I don't find myself summoning them very frequently. It's mostly just the passive accumulation of them through the gates. And you're going to have the most of them because you'll get them from the earliest gates all the way up to the latest gates. I kind of wish that the scaling on them was a little different, right? It feels weird that you kind of cap out on Blue Horrors very, very early. I think, what is it, around... I think it's around like the 4th or 5th gate that you're already at 3d3 horrors, Blue Horrors, and it just stays that way for the rest of the game. So I kind of wish that this was a little tweaked to where the curve was more stable. Maybe like 1d3 the first scenario, and then, you skip a level and then you get 2d3, and then you skip a level and then you get 3d3, and then you skip a level and you get 4d3, something like that, right? But either way, nothing to write home about, but useful free spawn, right? Pink horrors are significantly different. Like, these guys have a much better situation going on for them. They have higher HP, they have better magic resistance, they have better strength and stats all around. They have 13 invulnerability, which isn't significantly better, right? But they have all of the same rest of the stats. They get the same claw, but they also add a higher damage bite. And this does matter, right? 15 damage is still not especially high, but it is a magic damage bite, and you can buff it with things like Strength of Giants. So that does make these guys threaten ethereal things significantly better, right? And then Cast Pink Fire is just a better version of Cast Blue Fire. It has higher range, it has higher precision, it has higher damage, still does the same type of effects, still does 2 casts, still very, very useful. Still usable in melee. Very, very useful. These guys are actually quite good, and if you get enough pink horrors early on, they absolutely can turn the tide in a big fight, or just make a difference when you're invading someone. These guys are actually pretty good. Enjoy them quite a lot. Next up are Flamers and Screamers. So this is reversed. I don't know if this is like alphabetized, but it also is reversed in the way that they're summoned, right? In that Flamers show up earlier than Screamers do in Conjuration. But then with the gates, Screamers show up before Flamers. And I think Flamers are effectively the better unit. So I'm going to look at Screamers first, okay? So Screamers are very large. They are size 7. So you're only fitting one of these bastards into a square, right? That hurts them immediately, okay? They do have very high HP and very high strength, though. They have 13 invulnerability. They add some shock resistance to the mix of the rest of the resistances that they have. And they are flyers. They're also floaters, but they're flyers, right? So add that into the mix compared to the blue horrors and the pink horrors. They also have storm immunity, which I think is a very big point in their favor, okay? So what you're getting out of this deal is very low attack density, but a thing that takes buffs reasonably well, not crazy well, but reasonably well. Regeneration on these guys is pretty good. Army of Giants on these guys is pretty good. And they fly in storms, and storms are something that you can effectively and easily put up and counter yourself. So this makes them pretty damn useful. They also have very high map move. They have a high damage bite, 19 damage bite out of the gate. That is magic, is pretty good. You can buff this up to 24 damage very easily. And then they have a pretty interesting ability in the Flying Slash. So, this is a lower damage, potentially blunt or slash, right? Area of effect 1 attack, and its defense negates. So, it's really quite interesting. If you find yourself, the thing about it is it's weird to find a situation where all of the things line up well, right? Because in theory, for this to work well, you want low protection, low defense targets with a lot of bodies per square and a lot of screamers. And that just doesn't happen a lot, right? Especially in a mod like this, you're typically going to run into things that either have high defense or have high protection. I guess sometimes you run into like more chaff-oriented armies, and in those cases, screamers can kind of shine because all of a sudden they can start maybe not deleting squares, but dealing damage to squares more effectively, which helps kind of deal with their low attack density, right? Overall, really interesting. Not like the end-all be-all, especially considering you can summon one at Conjuration 5, but still very useful. If for no other reason than the fact that they have very high HP, they're demons, so they have 30 morale, and you can fly them into a backline. So again, if you can get 10 to 20 of these relatively early, and someone isn't expecting to have 10 to 20 screamers in their backline, that can be a big deal. They also have 5.8 siege strength because they're flyers. So if you need them for some siege, that is also a decent option. But again, you're paying 3 air gems for one of these suckers, presuming that you're not at the point where you're free spawning them yet. And you're never going to free spawn a lot of them. Keep in mind, maximum you are getting 1d3 screamers. And this is another thing that I dislike. You get screamers and flamers at the point where it's nice to have them, but you're not getting a lot of free spawn out of them. I wish they scaled just a little bit better. I wish the maximum for screamers was like 2d3 and the maximum for flamers was like 1d3. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. This is what you're getting out of the gate. So, flamers are, in my opinion, the big ones. They are very, very, very useful. They don't have as much HP as the screamers do, but they are size 5, so you get 2 of them into a square, and you get a shit ton of attacks out of them. They still do the same thing as everyone else. They don't have cold resistance, but they have significantly more fire resistance, which I think is actually more useful for Tzeentch overall a lot of the times. 15 fire resistance, 10 poison. They are floating, which is very useful. 22 map move, 2.3 siege strength, generally fast, very fast in combat, 15 MR, good stuff. But really, it comes down to their attacks, right? So you have a Wicked Claw, which is armor piercing. The thing does 17 magic damage, and it has pierce, but it is also armor piercing on top of that. That is super, super duper useful. Having a bunch of these can absolutely make the difference when you're dealing with high damage or high protection targets, especially after you buff them and they're dealing 21 damage on a hit. That is piercing, armor piercing. You also have Flamer Maw, which does not have the armor piercing, but has the multiple hits of a what's it called? What are the blue fire, pink fire scenario, right? So the Flamer Maw hits for damage, right? And 17 damage is still pretty good. And on a hit is going to cast armor piercing fire, which is going to be lower damage, but still decently high, and is going to cast the Soul Scorch, which is also armor. So pretty good, right? Like this is a nice added effect. I find it less useful than the Wicked Claw, but still quite useful. And then you have the 2 gouts of Warp Flame. So these, unlike the horrors, these do not get used in melee, right? So you do need to kind of comprehend or plan, are you trying to use these flamers for their ranged effectiveness, or are you trying to get them into melee to armor pierce some things or magic attack something, right? Now, the gouts of Warp Flame are also armor piercing, lower damage, right, at 15, but they are also armor piercing. You can increase the range by increasing their strength. They have very high precision, so it's very good. And they are AoE 1. So you're going to fire 2 of these. They're going to hit AoE 1. They have extra added Soul Scorch effect. These will obliterate chaff or low to mid-tier units. These things do fantastic against non-elite, or the Gout of Warp Flame specifically does fantastic against non-elite units. This is why I think the Summon Flamer spell at Conjuration 4 is actually one of the most effective, cost-effective tools that you have to just pull out of a random hat. against someone who is aggressing on you very early, because the Wicked Claw Flamer Maw combo is pretty decent at dealing with some elite units. And the Gout of Warp Flame is great at dealing with massed units. If you have 5 to 10 of these things on turn 20, when someone has come at you real hard, or maybe around turn 15, because it's very easy to get to Conjuration 4, right? It's much more difficult to get to Conjuration 5, where people are expecting, like, air elementals or earth elementals or water elementals. These flamers come out at Conjuration 4, and they do a good job. Like, I think they are very, very useful. The issue, of course, being that they only have Protection 5, so if you put them up against elite stuff, they do get chopped up. They have decent HP, but against really killy things, it's not going to matter for very long. It's kind of a DPS race, unless you are able to, like, point buff them in some manner. The issue is that they don't take early game point buffs especially well. They have natural protection 5, so what are you going to bark skin them? It's not going to do a whole hell of a lot for them overall. It'll help, but it's not like crazy good. You can do things like mist forming them. If whoever you're up against doesn't have magic weapons or hit really, really hard, then Mistform / Body Ethereal can turn a group of flamers into a death squad. And, that type of situation can be really, really good. So, interesting daemon options. Not the greatest. I think that some of the other Chaos factions have some better daemon options, or I think maybe like the Tzeentch ones feel more broadly acceptable, whereas some of the other Chaos factions I feel have like some very specific niche options that are like, yeah, this is super useful for X. That being said, I think they're really cool, lovely models, beautiful models, in a horrific kind of way. And they have their uses, especially when you're free spawning them out of your capital. Say you get the 8th gate unlocked, and you're just 5 turns go by, and all of a sudden you have a decently sized demon army out of your capital, right? When we were looking at the special mechanics, I think, yeah, one of those turns I got 5 blue horrors, 6 pink horrors, 2 screamers, 2 flamers. Another turn I got 6 blue horrors, 4 pink horrors, a screamer, 2 flamers. Right, so you take 5 to 10 turns of that, and you've got a decent-sized army going on. The scenario, the kind of issue is none of these are especially high protection. No, they're not super survivable. They're demons. They kill shit and then they die, right, is kind of the scenario. So, moving on from demons, we'll take a look at the Chaos Spawn options real quick. So, Chaos Spawn only have 3 ways to summon them, and then obviously every time a Chaos Warrior or Chaos Knight promotes, you have a chance of getting a spawn, and then every time a Aspiring Champion, Exalted War, or Exalted Hero, Chaos Lord promote, you have a chance of getting a Chaos Spawn, and hopefully you don't, right? So, Chaos Spawn, you can get 1 Chaos Spawn at Conjuration 2 or 1 Fire Gem. You can also get 1 Chaos Spawn at Blood 1 for 5 Blood Slaves. So, this isn't the most useful on the face of the planet. However, if you get rushed really, really early and you're just desperate and looking for options, you could do worse by just gambling and summoning some Chaos Spawn, because there are some really powerful greater spawns of Chaos that maybe fuck over your enemy. So, it's an option. That being said, at Conjuration 5, you actually get something really, really quite good. And I think this might be the best summoned unit spell in Tzeentch's arsenal, and that is Spawn Cavalcade. So for 9 gems at Fire 3, which is not super difficult to achieve for you in any way, shape, form, or fashion, for 9 Fire gems, you're going to get 13 Chaos Spawn. Now, 13 Chaos Spawn, that's a good efficiency number. Obviously, that's going to be a random mix of lesser and greater Chaos Spawn. You might get lucky and get a bunch of really good greater Chaos Spawn. You might not get lucky and get some meh lesser Chaos Spawn. I think, though, that especially considering Conjuration 5 being kind of one of those pretty common anti-rush strats, in the idea that, oh, someone came at me really hard. Maybe not anti-rush, but like first war defense or offense kind of strats, in the concept that, hey, we get to Conjuration 5 and we have a bunch of air mages, we'll do a bunch of air elementals. Or we get to Conjuration 5, we have a bunch of fire, we'll do a bunch of fire elementals. That is, I think, a pretty common strat, and Spawn Cavalcade falls wonderfully into that, and also, I think, goes very well later on to the game, as long as you're willing to burn the 9 fire gems. You might not be willing to burn the 9 fire gems because you might want to be saving them for Demon Princes or something like that. But you do get a lot, and they can potentially be very good. So let's take a look at what they actually are. All right, so you have this whole list of lesser Chaos Spawn and greater Chaos Spawn. I do not know how these are weighted. I will say, having played a lot of Tzeentch, having played through an entire multiplayer game and having played several single-player games, it does not feel like they're weighted at all. So there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I get these guys show up just as frequently as these guys seem to show up, right? It doesn't feel like, oh, I get a bunch of these and I very rarely ever see these. No, I see all of them all the time. So it might be a relatively even spread. Obviously, there are just fewer greater Chaos Spawns than lesser Chaos Spawns. So even with an equal kind of like ratio, you're gonna get less graders. But these guys show up pretty frequently, which is why I was saying, like, if you need to gamble on a Conjuration 2 1 fire for 1 Chaos Spawn, you can still get some good shit out of it. So it might matter. Anyways, let's just go through them and take a look real quick. So we've got this one. We've got the Bird Boy. Very, very Tzeentch appropriate. It's got like bladed hands, bone blades on his hands. Very neat. Most of the Chaos Spawn, I say most of, pretty much all of the Chaos Spawn, you're going to get a unit that is size 5 or up, with the greater Chaos Spawns being bigger, obviously. You're going to get high HP, you're going to get high strength, but you're going to get relatively low everything else, right? Generally low protection. Magic resistance is good because they're Tzeentch. They still have, so you see they're not demons, right? They are not demons, but they still have demon morale, which is very useful, right? And they all tend to be decently fast. I don't think any of them are just like sluggish crawlers. So this particular, they're also all True Sight, Dark Vision, Recuperation, and Cold Resistant and Snow Move. So that's just kind of the Tzeentch package with their stuff. So this particular version has Berserker 1, which can be very useful. They have 21 damage on 2 attacks, and then they have a third 15 damage attack. So this is what I'm saying when it's like, none of the Chaos Spawn are bad. And if you threw out, if it was turn 15 or 16 or something like that, and you hit Conjuration 5 and you needed bodies, and you spent 9 fire gems, and you got 13 of these guys, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Spawn Cavalcade, I think, is actually really good on the efficiency of what you're getting. Obviously, these guys are low protection, low defense, high HP, kind of like just bags of hit points. But they hit hard enough to make a difference. And if you support them right and utilize them right, you absolutely can do a lot with them. They're, I think, really quite good. Chaos Spawn in general, maybe not this particular variant being the best one, but I think this particular variant is actually pretty damn decent. Berserker, 221 attacks, pretty solid. Next up, we have, I will say, so we're gonna see this immediately, is that the split tends to be between the melee variants and the ranged variants, right? So this is our first ranged variant, 32 HP, 7 protection, still low, same kind of boat that we kind of talked about, right? Tends to have high strength, high hit points, low protection, low defense, good magic resistance, demon-like morale, right? So these guys also have fire resistance, whereas the other ones did not, right? So get some fire resistance on them. They are still Berserker 1. I wonder, I can't remember if all of the Chaos Spawn have some sort of Berserker, but they might. So these have lower damage claws, so less useful, but they have their own cast blue fire. So much like the blue horrors, they have their own cast blue fire, and this does get utilized in melee. So this hit shoots twice, and they have 2 attacks. So you're still getting a lot of attacks out of this particular body. So again, maybe not quite as killy, but has some depth of capabilities in the concept of some ranged attacks. Next up, we have this version. So, same bag, no cold resist on this, guys. These are like the Flamer Chaos Spawn variants. They are firmly in the fire resistance situation, though they still have snow move, which I think is funny. Still Berserker 1, and they have the Flamer mod that the Flamers have. So when they hit with the Flamer mod, they're gonna deal damage, which is decent damage. They're gonna have the cast fire, and they're gonna have the Soul Scorch ability on. They also have a claw and a bite. Nothing real special going on with either of those, but then they also have a singular gout of Warp Flame, like the Flamers have, that hits AoE 1 on both components. So still super useful, right? Next up we have these boys, which I think looks so cool. I love them. Same scenario, high HP, high strength, yada yada yada. We are looking at 2 claws. At 16 damage, which is not that big of a deal. And then we have the cast fire. So these are, I think, probably my least favorite from a mechanical standpoint, but I love how they look. If you cast Spawn Cavalcade and got 13 of these guys, that would be pretty disappointing. I don't think they are super fantastic, because the cast fire in this particular instance does not have 2 cast fires, just a single cast fire. I guess it is armor piercing, which the other ones are not, right? No, they are. Yeah, those are armor piercing. So yeah, these are just kind of like the least effective versions in my opinion. But you know, it is what it is. They can't all be winners. Next up, you have these guys, which look dope. I love their little tail and their little mouth arm and their little sword arm. It's fantastic. Slightly less HP. HP is dipping down, but they do have slightly better protection. These guys actually take point buffing a little bit better than some of the other lesser Chaos Spawns do. And they have Berserking 2 rather than Berserking 1. They only have 2 attacks, but they actually do have armor. So they've got a bone helmet. And that helps when you're trying to point buff them with, like Legions of Steel is the big one now. Whatever the small version of Legions of Steel is now, Barkskin, that type of stuff, right? So still quite useful. They have the Bone Blade, which is 22 damage, just relatively high damage. And then they have a Venomous Bite, which does have a weak poison on it. Not super effective. These guys are generally pretty useful. They take buffs better than a lot of the other demons do, or a lot of the other Chaos Spawn do because of their higher protection, and that is useful in and of itself. All right, and transition. Sorry, I had to take care of something. We've got the last Lesser Chaos Spawn is this boy, Tentacle Boy. So this guy is actually really good. He is a Lesser Chaos Spawn. I think if only for the reason that, his HP is lower and he has a better version in the Greater Chaos Spawn, but this guy is actually pretty damn good. So same scenario, high HP, high strength, lowish protection. He has Berserker 1. He has a spiked Whiplash, which is good, better, +2 attack against shields, which is pretty good. It's not magic, which is unfortunate. But he has a Magic Claw, which is slightly lower damage. He has a Venomous Bite, and then he has a regular bite that is magic. So 2 magic attacks, a poison attack, a better against shield attacks, size 5, so you can get 8 attacks per square if you have multiple of these, and Berserker 1. They are actually pretty good. Again, definitely can make the difference in an early battle if you're utilizing them. So pretty cool. Then we get into the Greater Chaos Spawn, and immediately we get the better version of what we just saw. So there's a reason why this guy is greater. The issue I have with the Greater Chaos Spawn, they're still totally worth it. 100% happy every time you get them, right? But the issue that I have with the Greater Chaos Spawn is that they are larger than size 5, so you're not getting 2 per square, but they're not super large, so you're not getting like crazy HP, right? So 50 HP is still significantly better, still significantly higher strength. The rest of their stats, humanish, mediocre, right? These guys do come in at 10 natural protection without armor. They have a bunch of attacks, right? You're going to get a claw. You're going to get 3 of those spiked whiplash, so quite good against shields. And you're going to get a high damage magic bite. This is a lot of attacks. It's not quite the attack density as some of the lesser chaos spawns being in the same square, but you can have a size 6 greater chaos spawn and a size 3 chaos warrior in the same square. So you can kind of like augment that situation depending on how you work things out. The unfortunate thing there is the combat speed of the chaos spawns tends to be significantly higher than the chaos warriors, right? The big things, or the big thing out of the greater chaos spawn is that they have fear 8. If you are in an early war and I say early war, or you get like Conjuration 5 because you're intending on doing Spawn Cavalcade, if you get a couple of these and you have Fear 8, they absolutely can fucking make a huge amount of difference in your fight. I have definitely seen fights where these particular Greater Chaos Spawn have carried the day because they start to rout units with their Fear effect. Okay, Otis, I love you. Get out of my lap. Get. So, really, really, really good. Always happy when you get these. Next up, we have the other melee variant. These have slightly less HP. They have slightly more strength. I think the other one was 19 strength. 9 protection versus 10 protection, etc., etc. These guys have Berserker 2 and Fear 5, so not quite as high a Fear, but better Berserking. And they just have a blender of magic attacks. So these guys are pretty damn good at killing things. Unfortunately, again, size 6, so you're only getting 4 attacks out of these, considering the 5 attacks from the previous one, but you can set them with something else, right? And that does pretty well. I think it's worth noting, right, that the Chosen Knights are speed 22, and a lot of the Chaos Spawn are in the speed 18 kind of like range. So the Chosen Knights will kind of like outspeed them, but they won't outspeed the Greater Chaos Spawn as much as the Chaos Spawn as much as the Chaos Spawn will outspeed the Chaos Warriors. So that is a factor that you can kind of like try to wiggle it in to where both types of lines hit together. I guess that doesn't matter as much for Greater Chaos Spawn. It works well for the Lesser Chaos Spawn, right? Because the Lesser Chaos Spawn are size 5 and the Chosen Knights are also size 5. So it's just something to consider. Anyways, these guys, pretty good. Love having the fear. Getting either of these guys is very good. Notes, we'll talk about that at the end of the Chaos Spawn, actually. I'll hold that idea. And then the last two are the kind of like ranged variants of the Greater Chaos Spawn. So these boys, same type of situation. They have fire resistance. They have Berserk 1. They have a non-magic fist, which isn't great. But very specifically, they have pink fire, blue fire, and just regular fire, all at different ranges, right? So 2 attacks on the pink fire, 2 attacks on the blue fire, and then just 1 attack on the regular fire. But that is a lot of ranged damage coming out, and it's decently high for what you're looking for. And it's all armor piercing. So these guys are quite good. Again, especially early on, if you're dealing with a lot of enemy units, like just a massive Scales army or something like that, these guys are fantastic at handling. Like 5 of these guys can just do a shit ton of work out of nowhere, right? So very cool unit. And then you have this version, which I love the little bird head on. Love all the eyeballs. They're great. So this is another flamer variant, right? So you do get some shock resistance as well as some fire resistance on this one. They have a magic damage bite. They have the flamer maw, and they have the gout of warp flame, which is area of effect 1. This is probably my least favorite of the Greater Chaos Spawn. It's still good, but when it comes down to like the whole this one tries to be like hybrid between the Flamer Maw and the Gout of Warp Flame, but the Gout of Warp Flame doesn't work in melee, so like these guys tend to be better ranged units, because you're getting normally 5 attacks, though not always, depending on the range. These guys are still good, right? They're just not as good as Flamers are. And they don't fill the niche of a lot of different things that you're trying to do with the Chaos Spawn. So, something to consider with the Chaos Spawn. They are very powerful units, or they can be very powerful units when utilized appropriately. But 16 combat speed, 16 combat speed, 16, 18, 16, 16, 18, 18, 18, 20 versus 8. And I think 10 on the halberd versions, right? I think the halberd variants of Chaos Warriors go up to 10. So most often, as at least in the early game, if you're expanding with Chaos Warriors, you're rolling around with them, and then all of a sudden they get enough experience to promote, and you get a mix of Chosen Warriors, who are now combat speed 10. You get some Forsaken Warriors, which are combat speed 12. And you get some Chaos Spawn, which are between 16 and 20. It is very important that if you want to keep these units around, you need to pull them out and script them appropriately, right? If you have say you have a stack of 20 Chaos Warriors that you're expanding with, right? Or 10 or 15 Chaos Warriors that you're expanding with, and suddenly half of them promote, if you just leave that stack as is, what's going to happen is the Chaos Spawn that you got, maybe you like got 3 or 4 Chaos Spawn, they're going to run in ahead of any Forsaken and Chaos Warriors and Chosen that you have, and they are going to get surrounded and killed. These guys have a lot of HP, but they have low protection, especially low protection compared to something like the 22 of the Chaos Warriors. And they have no defense. All of them have like basically no defense. They're gonna get hit every single time. They're gonna take a shit ton of damage, and they're gonna die. You need to every time you get promotions, you need to go back into that unit and you need to reorganize that unit so as to effectively stagger the way that your lines hit, preferably with the Chaos Spawn hitting after any of your Chaos or Chosen Warriors, right? That is the best case use for them. And then if you are diligent in the way that you protect your Chaos Spawn, later on, you can create entire units because all of a sudden you have 30 or 40 of these bird guys. And so you can create a particular unit around them. Or you have, 10 or 20 of these guys, and you specifically want to buff them with X effects, right? So you can make a squad of them and go from there, right? Like maybe you want to point buff with regeneration or something like that, right? So Chaos Spawn are actually really, really strong. I would argue that the better Chaos Spawns are better than your Chosen Warriors unless you are using a good bless for them, right? Pound for pound, if you had to pick this guy or this guy or this guy, right? Often you want the greater Chaos Spawn versions more often than you want the Chosen, unless you have a bless that you're specifically using for Chosen. Though I would say more often, if you have a bless, you're using that bless for the Chosen Knights, right? So that's an entirely different situation, basically. So, and then of course, right, like the Forsaken, I think are probably the I can't click on the right thing. The Forsaken are, which one is it? Yeah, Forsaken are probably the least useful, but they're still useful, right? They still have armor. They take buffs better. They take protection buffs better, at least specifically, than the Chaos Spawn do. The Chaos Spawn have a bunch of HP, and if you use the right things on them, they are very difficult to deal with. Namely, the things that come to mind, especially from an early game standpoint, are using what is it? Body Ethereal, right, on them. It's very, very strong. And then using Regeneration on them is very, very strong. So Regeneration is, I guess not, actually. So obviously, Regeneration is something you can do later on, but it's very difficult to do early on because you only get your nature 1. So did they increase the cost of regeneration from Dom 5 to Dom 6? I feel like I remember being able to point buff regeneration with nature 2s. Neither here nor there. I'm going off on a tangent. Anyways, the point is greater Chaos Spawn can be very, very useful if you are careful and specific in the way that you utilize them. And I think Spawn Cavalcade is actually quite good. Again, getting 13 of these guys for 9 fire gems. Say an enemy army is barreling down on your door. It's turn like 15 or 16, maybe 17 or 18, and you just hit Conjuration 5, right? Throwing 18 gems, 18 fire gems into 23 Chaos Spawn, you can get a lot of combat power out of that. A lot of combat power out of it. And as long as you make sure to utilize them and utilize them in the appropriate manner, you can make them work for you a lot. So, anyways, that is the special units, special summons, special units section of Tzeentch. Next up, we're going to talk about commanders. All right, let's talk about the commanders for Tzeentch. Now, this is kind of a weird scenario because talking about commanders can get very complicated very quickly anyways. There's a lot of niche uses for a lot of different things. So take what I say with a grain of salt, but it's also noodly because of the promotion mechanics at play within Tzeentch, but also the summon mechanics at play within Tzeentch. So we're probably going to be jumping back and forth throughout this. I'll try to keep it as like linear and contained as possible, but bear with me on this, all right? First things are going to be very easy, right? So Marauder Scouts coming in, normalized kind of scout situation, nothing big, nothing crazy. They do have snow move, which is pretty nice, especially if you should be running cold, so presumably you have snow move. So it's really nice to kind of like be able to maneuver around a little faster in your territory. That's quite good, but otherwise you're getting a pretty normal, pretty typical Marauder Scout going on or a Scout period going on in this situation, right? Next up, you have the Marauder Chieftain. Notably, Scouts, Chieftains, and Horsemasters can all be recruited outside of forts. This is also notable for your Marauder, just Marauders and Marauder Hunters. That's very useful in the right situations, right? Marauder Light Horseman, I don't know why you used, but that is also not. Anyways, Marauder Chieftain, these are your typical low-tier leaders. They do have some special uses, though. And their special uses are they have sailing, right? So they've got sailing that can be useful. They only take max size 4 on the sailing, though. So note that means maneuvering Chaos Spawn or Knights or things like that is a no-go. Goddamn cat. Fucking cat! So there's that. They have decent leadership coming out of the gate, but you're not going to get formations or a bonus or anything like that. These guys are perfectly fine to maneuver around most of your stuff early on in the game. No big deal. They're fine. Berserker 2 or Beastmaster 2, Tax Collector, they've got a lot of little things going on, but nothing that just makes them super crazy weird or niche, except for, I think, the sailing, right? Next up, you have Marauder Horsemasters, which are less good leaders with pretty much the same scenario going on. Really, the only times I see using these is if you need a leader with higher map moves, specifically for moving around things like Marauder Horse Archers, which have a high map move. These guys, combined with Marauder Horse Archers, combined with Snow Move, blitz around your fucking territory. So that is very useful, but that is an edge case use. The vast majority of the rest of the time, I think you're better off using Chieftains and or better leaders for that type of stuff. We are going to skip the Aspiring Champion because the Aspiring Champion, Exalted Hero, Chosen Lord, Daemon of Tzeentch all go into the promotion chain. So we're going to ignore them for now, and we will touch on them as we get over towards the end of the commanders. Next up, we have the Cultist. And this guy, I think, is invaluable for Tzeentch. The way that the secret mechanics work for Tzeentch, the amount of free gems, gear, free spawn, and then gem sites you get out of Cultist or out of your Dominion, or out of generating secrets with your Dominion is amazing, right? It's great. And Cultists are decently cheap, only 1 recruitment point, so you can get 2 of them out of a fort. They are H1s that are stealthy, that have Inquisitor, that are also spies. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck for 70 gold out of a cultist, right? They are very easily massable and generally useful against undead nations. So useful against Nehekara, useful against Nagashazar, useful against the vampires, and useful against any other nation that has like a lot of death or something like that. Nagaron comes to mind. I think Nurgle does weird things with death, but maybe that's not good. Anyways, there's a lot of really good uses for these things. I expect that most people that play Tzeentch are going to play with the concept of pushing their dominion, and the cultists are going to be fantastic at doing. You're going to get a couple of them early on, probably just to put temples down, but then they are eternally useful preaching against enemy dominion, right? Double the effectiveness of their priest level for preaching against other faiths. With the Inquisitor, you can basically just sit them on your border provinces, inside enemy territory, and just preach against them for eternity. And you can throw spies at people, which is really, really cool, right? So additional information, better information. You can infiltrate capitals to get graphs, score graphs, my brain, or instill uprising. Of course, that is very hostile. Most people will not freak out if they catch some cultist preaching in their borders, but instilling uprising is definitely gonna break your non-aggression pacts. So be careful about that, right? These guys are great. These guys are fantastic. Love them. Next up, you have the Marauder Shaman. So Marauder Shamans do not require a... Recruitment does not require a lab. Recruitment does not require a lab. Recruitment does not require a lab. I don't know if that's correct. I think that's recruitment does not require a fort. Maybe it is recruitment doesn't require a lab. I don't remember. You know, I think that is correct. I think you drop a fort and you can actually recruit these bastards without having a lab. Anyways, these guys are not great casters. They are not great researchers, right? They have a inept researcher malice. However, they are useful in a number of different ways. Namely, they are your only native nature access. Typically, you're going to get at least a few of these early on just to site search for nature. If you don't get any other better indies, or if you just need early point buffs. So early Barkskin casters, early Moss Body casters. They also have death, so you can get water and glamour on your other units, but you don't get death or nature anywhere else, right? So getting a nature site searcher, getting a death site searcher out pretty early is very, very useful for these guys. You can pretty easily, I would say, nature is very common. So you can pretty easily just site search with, 2 or 3 of these in the early game, build up enough of an economy of a nature bank to boost one of these guys into Nature 2. Nature 2 will allow you to make a Thistle Mace, and then suddenly you're Nature 3. And with Nature 3, you can cast a good amount of the spells that you might want to cast, right? You can do some Foul Vapor shenanigans decently with that type of concept, but more often than not, you're just throwing out, group bark skins or things like that with these guys, doing some site searching, etc., etc. They do have a supply bonus of 10, so having a couple of these around can still be pretty useful, even into the mid to late game, just as extra supply. And in the late game, you'll actually find spells that are decent to cast. Frozen Heart casts pretty easily. What's the Storm of Thorns? No, that's not it. There's some higher nature that's low. That's pretty decent to cast. So these guys, mostly nature site searching and then point buffing early. That's your plan. Acolytes are your goddamn bread and butter. Hiya, these are really good. Holy fuck. Oh, you're getting a lot out of this. They are 170 gold, so they're not the cheapest astral mages on the planet, but they're not super expensive either. And you are getting a bunch for these guys. These are very, very, very good mages. They are good researchers, and they do well all the way throughout the game as combat casters. They have low HP and low morale, so that is an issue that you have to try to deal with. But you are getting a guaranteed astral with a 100% random of fire, air, earth, glamour, blood. That's a lot. That is a lot. Even without other higher tier mages like your sorcerer or sorcerer lord, these guys can communion up and cast a shit ton of spells. They are very, very good. They'll be your early game blood hunters. They will be your early game evocationists if you go that route. They'll be your early game conjuration if you go that route. They do a lot of good stuff, and even if you don't have them doing a whole lot of combat stuff, they're pretty damn good on the research side of things. They have Adept Researcher. They do well. On top of that, they are sacreds. So they have decent upkeep cost, which is great if you're playing Tzeentch as a Scales Nation, and even better if you're not playing Tzeentch as a Scales Nation. And they are stealthy spies. So the spy is less of a thing, right? Your cultists being spies is a nicer situation. But they are stealthy 50. You can move these guys around against an unsuspecting foe and suddenly pop up a small communion that just fucking goes ham. The issue is that you don't have any stealthy units that you can recruit, but you can fix that with indie recruitments that are stealthy or summons that are stealthy, right? So that is pretty interesting to be able to do something like just suddenly pop up and be like, oh, hey, you didn't know, but there are 10 acolytes here. And that's really nice. So very good unit. You're getting a lot out of this mage. This mage is a fucking workhorse. It's fantastic. Next up, you get the sorcerer, who is just better than the acolyte, but significantly more expensive, right? Like having to pay 440 gold for these guys over and over again is a lot. More often, you're going to get a bunch of acolytes, and you're going to get a couple sorcerers to mix in for the bigger things that you want to cast. That being said, out of the gate, these guys are much more survivable than the acolytes. They have significantly more HP. They have actual protection. They're not just a wizard wiggling his fingers in robes. They have very high magic resistance, which is very good for later on in the game, even though their morale still isn't the craziest, right? So these guys have really good stats, but you're paying for that a little bit. That being said, you're getting a Astral 2, Fire 1, Air 1, Glamour 1, which is pretty fucking great out of the gate. Also an H1. And then you get a 200% randoms, which just turns these guys into Crazy Town, right? So you have a 100% chance of being Fire 2, Air 2, or Glamour 2. And then you have a 100% chance of adding Water, Earth, or Blood into the mix. All fantastic. So these are how you can also get some water site searching aside from your Marauder Shamans. And also get water into a communion, which can be very useful, especially in the early game. And this is how you can get earth into a communion, aside from, I guess your acolytes can do that. But actually, your acolytes are just as good at doing it. Never mind, ignore that. Regardless, these guys are great. They do not have stealthy, but they do have snow move, which the acolytes do not have. I think the Acolytes might be one of the only units on the Tzeentch roster that don't have Snow Move. So that can slow them down. It does not slow the Sorcerers down, though they have slightly lower map move, right? So that is something to keep in mind. They are Fortune Teller 9, which is actually pretty useful. I like scales on Tzeentch, but if you want to go an aggressive bless with like chosen warriors or chosen knights, and you want to dump you want to take misfortune, right? Having the ability to throw out sorcerers that are Fortune Teller 9 every single time is pretty good, right? Like this can actually make it to where your fortifications have significantly fewer bad events happen to them, which is pretty fucking cool. Overall, these are great units. I find the issue with them is that the Acolytes are so good and the Sorcerer Lords are so phenomenal that the Sorcerers tend to be this situation that you get some of them, but typically you're either going for the concept of spending less money or you're going for the concept of more power. So, talking about more power. All of these are recruit from any of your forts or other locations depending on the situation. Sorcerer Lords are cap only. They are extremely expensive, slow to recruit, cap only, 680 fucking gold. But my god, do they come with a whole shebang of shit. So, 2 fire, 1 air, 3 astral out of the gate, 2 glamour out of the gate, H2, same 100% randoms as the sorcerers. So you can get fire 3. You can only get air 2. You can get glamour 3. And then you can mix in 1 of something else. So high fire, high glamour, already high astral, all options. Really, really, really quite good. They do come with their own fires, though often I say often you want to be just cannoning with them, but in the instance where you're trying to not like burn out a communion or something like that, you can have these Sorcerer Lords cast particular spells and then switch over to fire, and they'll do their job, right? So they're quite useful in that situation. They also have map move 24, and they are flying. They're flying around on their little fucking discs, which is awesome. And they have Spirit Sight, and they have Fortune Teller 18, and they have Storm Immunity, and they have Inspiring Researcher. So this is actually really nice. Ensuring that you send a Sorcerer Lord over to, like, the way most people play where they have a scenario where they have, like, a particular fortification that's, like, their research fort. And every turn they're gonna recruit their best researcher there so that they can keep their research piling up. If you do that, make sure you send a Sorcerer Lord over there so that they have the Inspiring Researcher buff, because this will add up over time, right? If you have a fortification that has a bunch of Acolytes working in it, all of a sudden 20 Acolytes is an extra 20 research a turn. It's almost 2 additional Acolytes, right? So that scales, not like crazily, it's not exponential scaling, but it scales, and it's a really nice addition. So these guys are fantastic. They do big magic. They are very expensive. I do not recommend getting them early on unless you have a very specific niche need for them. That need might be something like an early glamour spell that you're trying to like paint on something. But most of the rest of the time, whatever you're doing early can be done with the sorcerers. So I don't recommend diving into Sorcerer Lords too early because of how expensive they are, how slow to recruit they are. That being said, later on, their superb map move and the ability to fly, the fact that they just have a bitch ton of paths, right? And the fact that they are S3, Astral 3, out of the gate, meaning they can teleport out of the gate, is really, really good. Also means that they can get up to things like astral travel pretty easily. So these are phenomenal mages. Obviously, you're going to want a bunch of them. It tends to be the scenario of if you can win your early game war and you're established and you're doing well and your economy takes off, if you're playing like Scales, then you typically start going, okay, I turn on the Sorcerer Lord button and I don't turn it off. And if you can do that, you're going to get a bunch of awesome mages out of that scenario. So, very, very cool. Okay, so that is the units, but skipping the Aspiring Champion and Exalted Hero. And we skipped them specifically because Aspiring Champion and Exalted Hero are on the promotion change for the Path of Champions. So, talking about the Path of Champions again, it doesn't have the thing. I wish the mod included a button for the specific mechanics. Maybe like here, like you could just click one of these and it would bring up that message. But reminder, the Path of the Champions is the same as the Path of the Warriors. So Chaos Warriors can promote into Chosen Warriors, or they can be touched by Chaos and turn into Forsaken Warriors or Chaos Spawn. Aspiring Champions do the exact same thing. So these guys are tanks. These are, if you've ever looked at Warhammer Fantasy artwork, and you've seen like a Chaos faction, and you see the guys in the massive plate armor, and you see the really big ones in massive plate armor, those are like the Exalted Heroes. All of these smaller ones in plate armor around them that are still like super big and scary, just not as big and scary as that, those are the Aspiring Champions, right? So like these guys are pretty cool, but they're somewhat painful to utilize. They require 45 experience to promote. Out of the gate, they have 25 HP, which is really good, and 22 protection. They have a Khopesh and a War Pick. But they're not sacred, right? So you're not blessing them into thugs. They have no magic, and they have low leadership, right? They can only lead 30 units. Now, it is good leadership. They do give a morale boost to units, and they can do formations, I believe, but it's low amounts. These guys are really good for leading around small squads of Chaos Warriors, which is appropriate because they're Aspiring Champions, but they're not as good at leading around squads of like Marauders or Marauder Horsemen or things like that, right? So keep that in mind. These guys can't lead a lot of units around, but what you're getting out of them is the chance to promote into a significantly better unit. The other side is they only cost 1 commander point to recruit, so you can get 2 of them per fort a turn, per turn per fort, but they cost a decent amount of resources and a decent amount of gold for the fact that they don't have good leadership. I know some people like to just churn out Aspiring Champions in the early game with the concept of if you have 10 or 20 of these, you're going to get a lot of Exalted Heroes, some of which will get experience from like leading around troops. But even if you don't, you're still going to get them around turn 50 or 55, depending on when you get them in the early game. So I know a lot of people are really into the whole concept of shitting out a bunch of Aspiring Champions. That can be very effective, but it can also be a waste if it doesn't pay out for you. If they get killed off, or if they promote but they fail their promotion, right? That can be just a lot of time and money spent on nothing, right? Which is a little bit of a pain in the ass. If you, however, find an experience site, I absolutely recommend that you just go to town and you constantly have an aspiring champion with chosen or chaos warriors in that experience site, constantly creating a promotion factory, basically. Another thing that you can do with the aspiring champions to kind of like expedite the process is with Marauder Shamans, the Death ones, you can create champion skulls. Very cheap to create, only requires Death 1, and you can just find a couple of death sites early on. Often you're not doing a lot with death anyways as Tzeentch, because you don't have a lot of death magic. So you can just churn out some champion skulls, throw these onto aspiring champions, and then all of a sudden you're reaching that promotion threshold way faster. And what you get for promoting, if you succeed, right? If you don't fail and turn into a chaos spawn, what you get is the Exalted Hero. So this is a recruitable unit, right? Can only be recruited in the capital, or you can get it through aspiring champions promoting into it. Now, this is not a crazy good mage. Fire 1, Glamour 1. You can get off some interesting glamour spells early on. You can turn it into a fire caster, but mostly this is a promotional step and this is a good leader, right? So this is 110 plus 1 bonus formations. You're going to lead around a lot of units. This guy has tanky, good tanky stats. 32 HP, 22 protection, 17 magic resistance, 16 morale. Is sacred, so if you go a good bless, you can actually do something with it, which is awesome. And he has recuperation. So, aside from that, he has combat caster, but it doesn't typically mean much, except in the cases, random cases, you can occasionally like shotgun some things with some fire spells. Other than that, typically this guy is just a leader and a step in the promotion chain towards the next thing, but it costs 60 experience this time. So it gets harder. So the whole like getting a bunch of aspiring champions and then getting them up to Exalted Heroes, that may happen, but then getting Exalted Heroes up to the next set is where things get very difficult. I should note that like your chosen, requires friendly Dominion Strength 5, requires Dominion 6+. You can't get Exalted Heroes until you have Dominion Strength 7. You can't recruit them. So that is something to keep in mind. It can be an issue if you need really good leadership and you're kind of stymied early on by your Dominion. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's something to consider. But they lead into... I'm going to click the right thing eventually. At 60 experience, the Exalted Hero has a chance to promote into a Chaos Lord. And these guys are where it starts getting pretty good. They get even more HP. Their combat stats are great, right? Very good. They are size 5, so they're getting to that point to where they're quite big. And they got a bunch of abilities. They are all flyers. They have Spirit Sight or True Sight and Recuperation. They have Storm Immunity, which is very useful. And they also have Combat Caster, and this is actually useful for them because they are Fire 2, Glamour 2. So you're getting way more out of them, which is really good. And they are fantastic leaders. So 170 just straight up, +2 bonus for squads. These guys are great. Obviously, The intention is to continue on down the chain, but if you take a bunch of aspiring champions and you just get them up to Chaos Lords, that is worthwhile, right? That is maybe not mission accomplished, but that is a worthy place to end up. So that's very, very good. You cannot recruit these guys, and you cannot summon them, which I think is interesting because you can kind of like get all around them. But yeah, these guys are quite good. They promote at 80 experience. So you got to go 45, 60, and then 80 experience. Each time having a chance to either promote into the next level or be turned into a chaos spawn. And if you succeed, you become a Daemon Prince. So obviously this is the big ticket in-game goal item for producing a bunch of aspiring champions. The hope is that 60 or 70 turns later, probably not even that many, right? Like, the hope is that you take 20 aspiring champions early on, and 5 plus of them make it to becoming Daemon Princes, right? All of the Chaos factions have this progression, this aspiring champion, exalted hero, Chaos Lord, into Daemon Prince. They are all unique in the way that they are represented by the various factions: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Norska, which Norska is basically just like Chaos Undivided, I feel. So these guys are fantastic. Size 8, 55 HP, wonderful combat stats, although not all of them are as good as the Chaos Lord themselves, which is, I think, kind of interesting. They have a base 18 protection because of the Chaos Plate Cuirass, which is pretty good. So that means you don't have to worry about augmenting them as much out of the gate, although obviously you still kind of want to with the right things, depending on what you're using them for. They have high magic resistance, 19 magic resistance out of the gate, and 30 morale. They are fantastic leaders, just like the Chaos Lords, but they come with a whole slew of shit. So they still have Combat Caster, they still have Recuperation, they are Flyers with 28 map move. Notably, they gain Disease Resistance 100. I think they gain Unsurroundable 2. Do Chaos Lords have that? They have Unsurroundable 3. I wonder why that is less. That's a thing. The big items is that they get invulnerability, but they already have higher protection. The big items are that they gain Fear 5, and they gain Dominion Immortality. So if they die within their Dominion, they will come back in 6 months, which is great. That's fantastic. Another notable thing about the Daemon Princes is that even though they are daemons, they do not become weaker outside of the dominion of their god. So you can use these guys to go on forays and do it very well. They are Fire 2, Astral 3, Glamour 2, H2. And you can do a lot of shit with that, right? So obviously, Astral 3 lets you run into situations like being able to teleport onto locations. Astral is going to let you do a lot of really good buffs. Body Ethereal comes to mind. The Astral Shield comes to mind. Glamour lets you do some good buffs. Displaced Body comes to mind. Fire lets you do a lot of different things, but namely Phoenix Pyre comes to mind, right? So you can situate a Daemon Prince later on with a decent smattering of gear to teleport on things. Body Ethereal itself, if you've got a crazy bless, obviously these guys can bless themselves and just go fucking wild. Out of the gate, they have equipment slots. They have a bunch of fucking arms. And this is a big deal, right? So they've got 2 miscellaneous slots like normal. They've got feet slots like normal. They've got a body slot like normal. They have a head slot, but it's only crowns and laurels because they have a fucked up starfish head, which sucks. But it is what it is. And then they have 3 arms. 1, 2, 3. That's super fucking useful. Oh, I didn't notate that on the... We're going to go back. That's super fucking useful because it means they can use a 2-hander and a shield. Or they can use 2 1-handers and a shield. Or they can use a 2-hander and a 1-hander. Or they can use 3 1-handers. It's really, really useful. That being said, every time you throw in a slot, you start to lose options, right? So if you throw on a shield, for example, they have a blade of pink fire and a blade of blue fire, which do the same effects as the blue horrors and pink horrors casting pink fire and casting blue fire, right? Which is awesome. So you get a bunch of attacks out of it. You don't need things like firebrands, frostbrands on them. They still work. They're still quite useful, but you don't need them because you do have multiple kind of like AoE multi-target hits, basically. Or maybe not multi-target hits is the best. Yeah, no, it's multi-target hits. So you have a lot more AoE than a lot of individuals would otherwise. You also have a claw and you have a corrosive bite. As you throw on things, you're going to lose access to these. I think the first thing that you lose, like you throw out a shield, you lose the claw. The corrosive bite comes from the tail, so you actually retain this no matter what gear you throw on, which is actually really cool, if I'm remembering correctly. So these guys are fantastic. They're awesome. And it's not the only way to get them through the whole daisy chain of promotions. You can just summon these bastards out of the gate for 50 fire gems, 3 fire, 3 astral, level 6 conjuration. You can just go, I want a Daemon Prince. Done. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good. As you can see, we got a bunch of them right here. We've been fucking around with shit. So you can do some pretty crazy things with the Daemon Princes, but even if you don't try to do just kind of like, even if you're not trying to do tricksy, dangerous, crazy stuff with them, they're still just incredibly useful, right? As a Daemon, they cost no upkeep, so all of a sudden, all of those, where are they at? All of those Chaos Lords, 160 gold, not the craziest upkeep, right? But they're also not the craziest mages. For a mage like a Daemon Prince, you'd be expecting to pay significantly more in upkeep. But you don't, because they're daemons. So you go through this whole route of these aspiring champions into these exalted heroes into these chaos lords, and then suddenly they start turning into Daemon Princes, and they're dope. Now, they are not head-to-head the best Daemon Princes in the game. Khorne has some really good ones. Nurgle has some really good ones. Slaanesh has some really good ones. Norsca has some surprisingly awesome ones. I think from a combat perspective, Tzeentches are probably on the lower end of the spectrum, but they're still fantastic. And they're amazing casters, right? So, really, really great kind of like chase item. Highly recommend that you look into them. Try to either promote aspiring champions into them, or try to utilize the fact that you can summon them for 50 fire gems. I want to note, I want to come back over here because I forgot to talk about this on the Sorcerer Lords, and this is a really important aspect. It is like the Daemon Princes of Tzeentch. These guys have multiple arms. These guys have 4 arms, though. Read them and weep. 4 fucking arms. That means you can do some crazy shit with them. Not necessarily as like combatants, although you could use them as combatants, or like melee combatants, right? What I mean more specifically is you can use a lot of interesting combinations of shields and or booster items by either empowering someone, like say you empower this guy in death, you can actually start combining items to where a person has significantly higher magic paths than almost any other caster would be able to, because they can just hold so much more shit. And it's really cool. It's really, really quite cool. You can do a lot of interesting stuff with the fact that they got 4 hands. So use them. Use the shit out of them. It's really, really neat. All right, so the last 2 things to talk about with the commanders is the other 2 special commanders, and that is the Herald of Tzeentch and the Lord of Change. So there's no promotion path to either of these. You can get Heralds of Tzeentch through luck events, or you summon them. And the only way that I know you can get a Lord of Change is through summoning it. So Heralds of Tzeentch, take a look real quick, are in Conjuration. You can summon a Herald of Tzeentch at Conjuration level 5 for 27 pearls. So, what does this guy do? He's got the whole Daemon thing going on, so decently high HP, higher strength. He is a caster primarily, though, so not that high. Heralds are supposed to be just priests, right? Fire 1, Astral 1, they come with the random chance of Fire, Air, Astral, or Glamour. So never going to be the greatest caster. They have 2 claw attacks, they cast Pink Fire, they've got Fire 5, Cold 5, Poison 10, a bunch of the other shit that demons do. Realistically, I don't think there's ever a reason that you spend 27 pearls to summon this guy. They look really fun, but I don't think that there's a reason to summon them. I could see if they were like Dominion spreaders or something like that, because they're heralds, right? Like, I could even see making them cost more if they were Dominion spreaders. But when you look at the lineup of what you have access to, the magic paths that you have access to, just from your recruitables, I don't really see a use for these guys for 27 pearls. That being said, again, you can get them through luck events, luck-based hero events, right? And if you get some of them, cool, great, you can still use them. But I don't see a purpose. These are the Marauder Light Horsemen of the commanders for me. They just don't have. They don't have any particular specific thing that is going on for them, right? And the last up is the Lord of Change, which is super duper cool. We're going to take a look over here at this. So, Astral 4, Glamour 2, 60 Astral Pearls to get a Lord of Change at Conjuration 7. That's a lot. That is a lot. Your Chaos Lord is going to need a booster, right? Which isn't difficult to accomplish, right? But not a Chaos Lord. A Sorcerer Lord will need a booster to be able to summon a Lord of Change, which doesn't cost a lot, but that is an extra potentially 10 Astral Pearls tacked onto these 60 Astral Pearls that you're asking for a Lord of Change. There's no other way to get a Lord of Change as far as I'm aware. So, these have to be a big ticket item for it to be worth it. And they kind of aren't, unfortunately, in my opinion, right? So, Lords of Change look stupendously cool. They Sombre did a fantastic job with the look on these models. They look amazing. Absolutely love them. but I don't really know what I want to do with them. Especially for 60 Astral Pearls, right? They, much like the Daemon Princes, they have pretty much all of the same shenanigans going on, right? They do have combat casters. They do have Dominion Immortality 6 months. They do have fear, a little bit more fear than the Daemon Princes do. They just have a little bit more of everything than the Daemon Princes do in general. And they are stealthy. Stealthy 85, which the Daemon Princes do not have going on for them, right? They are also Fortune Teller 27 because they know the future, basically. That's all cool. But at the end of the day, when you look at their stats, you're not really getting anything crazy for them, right? They're still only H2s. They're still only Astral 3s. They are Glamour 3, but you can also get Glamour 3s on your Sorcerer Lords, right? So it turns into a situation of I'm not really sure what the Lords of Change do. I feel like they need something else. They need to be Astral 4, or they need to be H3s, or something. To make matters worse, and I don't know necessarily why this is the case, but to make matters worse, unlike the Daemon Princes, Lords of Change do get the Malice when they leave Dominion. So their stats will decrease, unlike the Daemon Princes. But worse than that is they lose magic when they leave your Dominion. So this thing, which is... I'm not sure that it's that great, is not a 2 fire, 2 air, 3 astral, 3 glamour, 1 blood. It is a 1 fire, 1 air, 2 astral, 2 glamour. And I don't remember if you keep the blood or not. And they lose personal glamour. So I guess that's another thing that they have over the Daemon Princes is they in your Dominion they have personal glamour, which is cool. That's neat. It is really neat. But Daemon Princes cost 50 fire gems. Lords of Change cost 60 astral pearls. I do not feel like the two, obviously, right, like, do not get me wrong. The Lord of Change is a better caster than the Daemon Princes are. But they're not a significantly better caster than just a Sorcerer Lord is. Right? Like, you can get to what is going on with the Lords of Change with the Sorcerer Lords. You can get Fire 3. You can get Air 2. You already are Astral 3 on a Sorcerer Lord. You can get Glamour 1. You can get Blood 1. You also can throw Water into the mix. You can throw Earth into the mix, right? And obviously the Lords of Change have all of these other bonuses that the Sorcerer Lords do not. But the Sorcerer Lords also don't cost 60 Astral Pearls, right? Like, Astral Pearls are a big deal. 60 of them is a Ring of Sorcery. That's pretty huge. So, at the end of the day, and they don't lose stats leaving your Dominion. That's the big thing. Or not the stats, but the magic paths leaving your Dominion. Because of the loss of magic paths leaving your Dominion, that means utilizing these guys offensively is extremely, extremely difficult. And that just makes it incredibly challenging in my mind to justify them. Especially when you go up against other Chaos factions and you get things like Bloodthirsters, right? Like, because all of the Chaos factions have their Aspiring Champion, Exalted Hero, Chaos Lord, Daemon Prince. But then they all, I believe, also have their chase tier, or maybe not chase tier, I guess the Demon Prince is the chase tier, but they have their summonable end tier unit, right? And that's the Lord of Change for Tzeentch, and I love Tzeentch. I do not love the Lord of Change. I feel like it either needs something else, or I'm not aware of something and I need to be appraised of what that something is. So if anyone out there is like, oh, well, actually, you missed this fact about the Lord of Change, and that's the real big use for the 60 pearls they cost, please hit me up, because it's not like they can't do anything. Obviously, they're still good mages, but they're not that much better than a sorcerer lord. So if someone has some mystery concept, let me know. Otherwise, I'm of the opinion that you don't summon these guys, not until they get some sort of buff. And the ways that I would go for it, theoretically for me, would be either just make them H3s, right? Chaos, the Tzeentch in particular, does not have inherent H3s. So give the Lord of Change, let the Lord of Change be H3s. There are other ways to get H3s, obviously. But if you bake H3 into the Lord of Change, then all of a sudden it becomes a different situation. I would actually, if you go that route, I would go so far as to just make them H4s. Because that, I think, is actually thematic for them. And pretty cool. And then the rest of their stats, the rest of what's going on with them would not be as big of a deal. And that would no, I think I don't know why they lose a magic path. That, I think, just needs to go. The Daemon Princes don't lose magic path. No one else loses. They lose stats, but no one else loses magic paths, and I don't know why that happens. Anyways, I'm running off on a tangent. So that's the commanders for Tzeentch. Last thing that we're going to talk about from kind of like a mechanic standpoint is the heroes. So we've got a couple of different heroes. You've got the Tzeentch multi-heroes, and then you've got the luck independent heroes, so the unique heroes. And we will talk about them in the next transition. Oh god, did you actually make it to this point in the video? Holy shit. I hope you just skipped to this point in the video, because I'm pretty sure we're already like 2 hours in. I'm not gonna... Let's go. We got heroes to discuss. Heroes for Tzeentch. You've got, much like all of the Sombre Warhammer factions, you've got your multi-heroes, which are luck-based, and then you've got your luck-independent heroes. So these are all unique heroes. So in the realm of your multi-heroes, you have a bunch of stuff that we've already discussed. But that stuff is pretty good. You have your Chaos Lords, you have your Heralds of Tzeentch, and you have your Sorcerer Lords. So you can get all three of these as luck heroes. Here's the thing. I've played a decently long game of Tzeentch in multiplayer. I've played a bunch of Tzeentch in single player. I think I have across probably like 4 or 5 games with probably, a couple hundred turns between all of them. I have run luck 2 at a minimum, I think, on every single one of all of those games except for like 1. I have gotten 1 Chaos Lord, and I don't think I've ever gotten a Sorcerer Lord, and I've gotten like 4 or 5 Heralds of Tzeentch. So I don't know what the percentage is, but if you're considering luck for the purposes of getting the multi-heroes, good luck, because I haven't really seen it happen. Obviously, right, like, I've gotten a couple of Heralds of Tzeentch, but they're not what you're really after. You're after the fact that you can get a free Sorcerer Lord, which is awesome, or you can get a Chaos Lord, which is right next door to a Daemon Prince, right? I don't know what's up with this. Maybe I've got like some other mods that are messing around with like the hero statistics or the way that luck works. Maybe the way that luck works and the fact that Tzeentch is locked into at least Turmoil 2, maybe that fucks with your chances. I don't know. It just feels like for the amount of turns I've put into Tzeentch with playing with luck the vast majority of the time, luck 3 at times, actually luck 5 at times, because I've put up Celestial Rainbow in single player games, and I still just don't, these guys just don't pop for me. Maybe that's just bad luck for me, and it'll go well for you. If it does go well, then with Chaos Lords and Sorcerer Lords, you're getting some fantastic shit. So, kudos. Good job. Then we get into the luck independent heroes. So these are the unique heroes. You get 4 of them. These are pretty fucking interesting. Again, I think Sombre's heroes, or Sombre, the mod, the Warhammer mod, is amazing. I think Sombre has done a great job with the vibe and the lore behind it, and the unique heroes is where a lot of that comes to life. And I think he's done a fantastic job of it. So, jumping into things, we've got the Breath of Life. So, this guy is pretty cool, looks amazing. From a statistics standpoint, he is a Nature 2. If you luck out and you get him early, that can be incredibly helpful. Obviously, though, it's a luck-independent hero. So you may get him, you may play 200 turns and never get him. So it's just something to keep it in mind. He is Nature 2. If you get him early, that's super useful, right? He has a number of interesting things going for him. Aside from the fact that he is a Chaos Lord, right? I believe he's a Chaos Lord. He's a noble knight from the Empire. He's a big guy. He's got a lot of HP. He's got good combat stats. He has built-in regeneration. It's not much, but it is built in. He's got some resistances. He's got recuperation. And he's got Healer 1, which is, I think, the only instance of Healer popping up in Tzeentch, which I think is really, really cool. He also has a glowing greatsword, which attacks twice, which is kind of fun. I've seen this guy. So one of the things that I really love doing with the Warhammer mod is just throwing arenas up and letting the heroes fight it out in the arenas. This guy does pretty good in the arena a lot of times because he has high protection, high HP regeneration, and because his glowing greatsword, 1 hits very hard, but 2 has multiple attacks. So he's actually quite cool. If you have a crazy bless and you get him early, you can fuck people up with him. Is quite good. If you've got a crazy bless and you get him early, you can fuck people up with him just off of doing stuff like personal bark skin regeneration and just going to fucking town with whatever your bless is. Again, if you have a good bless. If you don't have a good bless, he's fine. He'll still do good in melee, but if you do have a good bless, he can actually blender some people, and it's kind of funny. He has a extremely special property that can be very problematic depending on how you're playing. And that is, he increases the growth scales in any province in which he is present. If you are running growth, you are a turmoil nation. So this can turn your capital into a forest. Watch out! So it's just something to be mindful of. If you're running death, then you get this guy randomly in the beginning of the game. He's suddenly a fantastic boon, and he turns your capital into an actual either neutral or growth province, which is super duper neat. But it's just something to be aware of. You need to be mindful of his positioning. It's not like it's going to happen instantaneously, but it is something that can kind of fuck with you if you're not aware of it. Really, really cool unit. Niche uses, but some exciting niche uses. We're going to save Curseling for last. We got Changeling. Okay. This guy, Changeling is I think in the realm of like the Heralds of Tzeentch. Yeah, he was once a mere Herald of Tzeentch. So this guy is kind of interesting in that kind of like same vein. More of a caster than a just straight attacker, right? He's got the whole magic staff, pink fire, pink fire. Now he does double cast pink fire, which is kind of cool. This guy is super neat because he is an assassin, right? He's an assassin that has 4 ranged attacks, 425 ranged attacks. I have seen him pop up in a bar with multiple commoners around and just go, there were commoners here? Which is super funny. Not like the craziest, like, oh my god thing on the face of the planet, but super funny. And if you kid him out, he can still actually do quite a bit of good work. Now, I do think specifically the way that his model works is that if you put too many hand slots on, he will lose his pink fires. So keep that in mind. Not necessarily a big deal, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, but it is something to keep in mind. He is also a combat caster, which can be extremely useful. He has 105 stealth, so typically he hides very, very well. And the other big use for him, I think, is that he is an Inquisitor, but he's an H2. So he is effectively an H4 when preaching against enemy dominion, which is really, really neat. He also has the side effect of increasing unrest by 10, but only in an enemy province. So if you have this guy, if you get this guy and you just want to park him for some extra research, he's not going to screw you over. He'll be good. But if you send him at the enemy, he can do some nasty things. So fucking do it on him, right? Hell yeah, do it on him. Anyways, moving on to the next thing. We have the Changer. Oh, witch god, his model looks so fucking cool. He looks so cool. And that's about it. Unfortunately. He's got really good combat stats, and he's got this blue fire glaive, which is just, it casts the blue horror's blue fire when it hits. And it hits pretty hard, but not like crazy hard, right? Like Breath of Life hits for 30 at 18 attack. The Changer hits for 24 at 18 attack. Now, granted, the Breath of Life doesn't have multiple hit components. It just has 2 attacks. But, you know, it's hitting for 24 and then 19, which is good. Yeah, it's good. I guess it does cast blue fire, so I think it does hit twice. So it's good. But this guy just doesn't have a lot of other stuff going on for him. He's got some magic, but none of this magic is going to set him apart like the Breath of Life is. He has Air Shield 70, which is neat. He's got Storm Immunity, he's got Combat Caster, but he just doesn't have any other big weird thing, right? The Changeling is a cool assassin and Inquisitor, right? And causes unrest. The Breath of Light is a Nature 2, which you don't normally get, and a healer, and has built-in regeneration, and is this kind of really cool duelist, and he improves the growth scales. Changer just doesn't have a lot of other stuff. I will say he's supposed to, right, have a famed amulet, the Golden Eye of Tzeentch, around his neck, which grants him near immunity to projectile attacks and projected from lightning. So that's what the air shield is, and that's why he has 5 shock resistance. I almost wish that he lost a slot, like had an actual item that was like cursed, unremovable, right? Like that kind of concept. And it gave him like 100% air shield and like 20 shock resistance. Because if that was the case, then that would be a thing. That would be like this guy cannot get shot and he doesn't give a fuck about lightning, right? And then you could kind of like turn that into a thing about him. Like maybe you use him as like a lightning trap or some weird shenaniganry, or you're going up against the dwarves and they have 300 crossbows and you're just like, have I got a man you need to meet, right? Like something like that. But as it is, he's got unique things about him, but they don't really matter. So I just feel like this guy is not especially exciting when you get him. Last, but certainly not least, we have Village the Curseling. And for people who play a lot of Dominions, you're gonna look at this and I'm gonna give you 3 seconds to immediately identify why this guy is a big deal. And it's the little green circle. This guy is an innate spellcaster. Now, he's only an innate spellcaster 1. So it's not like this guy is crazy end-all be-all or anything like that. But it's still innate spellcasting 1, which can have some really, really big uses. He's also got a good spread of spells, which allows him to be relatively easily boostable. You need better air, put an air helmet on him. You need better glamour, put a glamour helmet on him. You need better everything, put a ring of wizardry on him, right? About the only issue is that because of his whole twin brother kind of like smushed together situation, he does not get rid of his staff. He always has his staff. So you have this runed greatsword, which you can replace, but you only have one hand, which can fuck with your capabilities of trying to get, like, you can't put a staff of wizardry on him, etc., etc. That being said, this guy is one of those situations where it's like, hey, would you like to spend a lot of gems empowering him in Astral and then teleporting him somewhere to enslave the mind of an army? Because he can do that, right? Like, obviously, anyone can do that, but not quite anyone can do that like innate casters can do that. So this guy is one of those situations of like, he can be a big deal if you make him a big deal, right? Like, he can be a very big deal if you make him a big deal, which I think is really, really cool. So that wraps up the heroes. I think you got 3 really cool heroes in the Breath of Life, Curseling, and Changeling. All have their niche uniqueness and cool things that you can do with them. And then you have the Changer, which looks really, really cool, but I don't think is super useful for very much. So that is like 57 hours of Tzeentch. And we're not done yet, because I'm going to talk about some strategy. We've covered everything else. We might, and I've slipped in bits here or there talking about things that you can do or what you might consider, etc., etc. But I'm going to try to highlight some of the points that I think are the biggest points for Tzeentch, and how I think you should play them. So let's talk about that. All right, we're going to talk about that now. So, Tzeentch is an incredibly interesting nation that I think reads just like what the 10 is on, right? If we go back to the screen, he is the Changer of Ways, the Lord of Sorcery. You want to play Tzeentch if you want to play Magic. He has access to all of the spells. Nope. Nope. All of them. Fire? Yes. Air? Yes. Water? Not a lot, but you got communion, so yes. Earth? Not a lot, but you got communion, so yes. Astral? Hell yeah. Nature? Not a lot, but you've got Earth and Astral, so you can still get your nature into communions, so yes. Same with Death, right? Not a lot, but you can get there. Glamour? Fuck yeah. Blood? Not as much, but surprisingly easy to get in when you've got 170 gold acolytes that can random blood, and then you just put sanguine dowsing rods on them and go to town, right? So absolutely, you can be playing any type of magic that you want. More specifically, you can be playing every type of magic in major battles. And you can really kit your situation out around that. Your acolytes are sacred. Your sorcerers are sacred. Your sorcerer lords are sacred. All of your big summonable mages are sacred. You've got great sacreds in Chosen Warriors and Chosen Knights. Your daemons are not sacred. Your Chaos Spawn are not sacred. But your daemons come with inherent resistances. If you want to do some strategy where you're like, every fucking battle I get into past turn 50 has Firestorm in it. Cool. Put some fire resistance on your Bless, and you got it in the bank. Easy peasy. Have fun with that, right? Pretty much across the board, if you can think of some sort of magic scenario, you can do it. Obviously, less with nature and death. You kind of have to shoehorn your way into that, but it's still possible, right? And that's strong. That lets you do a lot of really crazy things, especially on top of the fact that you have a lot of mobility on your mages, and your base mages are stealthy. So I feel like this is kind of a craze that has popped up in the last couple months. I say the last couple months. I have no idea when this video is going to come out, so this might not be relevant anymore. But it's been this kind of like craze. Probably people have been doing it forever, but it feels like a lot of people are talking about it now in doing stealth traps with mages. And I think the biggest thing is that there's just not a lot of mages that have stealth, so you don't get to do a lot of stealth traps with mages. Tzeentch does. You can do it. It goes great. Now, that is just acolytes that have stealth, but the thing about it is typically to trigger your stealth attack, you want to magic phase into the stealth attack. So if you have 4 or 5 acolytes in a province and you're doing some, hinky little stealth trap with them, you've got the mages to cloud trapeze in there in the magic phase, or teleport in there into the magic phase, or do various targeted summons, rituals into the province for the magic phase. Tzeentch is magic. They do magic very, very well, and it's awesome. If you're going to play them for the magic and have fun with it. Go crazy. It's great. A little addendum on the magic side of things. Tzeentch is very good at magic dueling. Tzeentch is also very susceptible to being magic dueled. Your Chaos or your Sorcerer Lords are Astral 3, which is good, but not out of the realm of being magic dueled. Your Daemon Princes are Astral 3, which is good, but not out of the realm of being magic dueled. And I swear to God, if you spend 60 gems on a Lord of Change, and that 3 Astral gets fucking magic dueled, you are allowed to cry. So keep that shit in mind. With 170 gold acolytes, you are pretty good at magic dueling yourself. Not the best, but pretty good at magic dueling as well. But for the love of God, if you're fighting into an astral nation, watch the fuck out, because 10 of those motherfuckers can just pop up on your screen, and you can have a bad day when they just go, "Here you." so yeah, just watch out for that. Other than that, I think Tzeentch is, you know, they're locked in at Turmoil 2. They prefer Cold 2. They have Magic Limit 1. Tzeentch is potentially maybe Norska, maybe, but I think potentially better than any other of the 5 Chaos factions. I think Tzeentch benefits incredibly greatly from scales. You can play them with an aggressive Bless. You can put some stats or resistances or a mixed scenario on the Chosen Knights and go to fucking town. You can put magic weapons on the Chosen Warriors along with a bunch of other shit and go to town. You can run some crazy incarnate combinations and go to town. The issue is I think other nations do that better, right? Like, if you want to go crazy Bless, play Khorne. Their whole purpose is blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. If you want to go crazy Bless, go murderate somebody's face with that. If you want to do some weird hinky Bless, play Nurgle. They have the tools for it, and it works in their scenario. Same for like Slaanesh. Specifically, I think Khorne, and again, also Norska, because Norska being the whole undivided, they have really good tools. Tzeentch just really benefits from having scales. They have a lot of good stuff that they can put money towards. That goes fantastic with what they are wanting to do in general. And at the end of the day, they are the magic nation, right? They want a billion mages because those billion mages can turn around and do 1,500 things to you. It's fantastic. I don't know how we got from a billion mages to only being able to do 1,500 things. Ignore that. But the point is I think if you're gonna play Tzeentch, play them for their magic, and the best way to play them for their magic typically is having at least decent scales. Maybe not full scales, but at least decent scales. So that typically means not taking some weird awake pretender, although I do think maybe there are arguments for like an awake researcher if you're playing in a specific type of game or you're trying for a very specific setup. Kind of talking about pretenders, I'm going to do a whole pretender design for the pretender that I took. But really, I do think that there is a very, very strong argument for going a pretender that has high fire with the intention of putting up Eternal Pyre as soon as you can put it up, and then using the generated fire gems for either Demon Prince summoning or to spam out Cavalcade. Chaos Spawn, if you have the 20 gems from Eternal Pyre, and presumably you have, you know, the probably 10-ish gems that are probably going to come in your normal territory. And by like turn 40 or 50, you put up Eternal Pyre. Being able to either get a Daemon Prince every other turn, or every turn being able to get 39? Jesus. 39 Chaos Spawn? With some fire gems left over, mind you, right? Because it's I believe it's 9 fire gems and 13 Chaos Spawn. That is a lot of power. And those Chaos Spawn, they fuck. They slap. You can build really big armies pretty damn quickly doing something like that, or you can go for the concept of having these Daemon Princes, which are amazing casters and great combatants in their own right. Hadn't touched my computer for a while. It went to sleep on me. So I think there is a very, very, very strong argument for having a god that is high fire so that you can put Eternal Pyre up as soon as possible. And that might mean going dormant, right? That might mean going... if you go imprisoned, right, it still kind of works out around the concept of if you're careful in your research, right, and you have the research, you haven't like tanked your magic scales or anything like that, you can get to enchantment 6 by the time a imprisoned god is coming out, and also be getting up to Conjuration 6, so that it's this appropriate fit of being like, okay, I'm Enchantment 6, I'm Conjuration 6, my god popped, I throw up Eternal Pyre, every other turn I am getting a Daemon Prince now. I think that is a pretty good strategy, especially considering the Daemon Princes don't lose stats outside of their Dominion, and they're great Magic Phase attackers, or Magic Phase whatevers, right? Obviously, you got to be careful because you lose your immortality outside of your Dominion. So, you know, play that with the concept. I think, though, at the end of the day, getting 39 Chaos Spawn a turn might be kind of fucking OP if you do that, right? And that's just with the idea of 30 fire gems. That's just the concept of 10 fire gems in your base starting territory, and getting Eternal Pyre up. You can get more fire gems. You can alchemize more fire gems. You might get lucky and get 20 fire gems in your starting area. You can take luck and get fire gems from events, right? Like, you can turn what I think is a reasonable 10 and 20, so a reasonable 30 per turn, into 40 or 50 per turn pretty readily, and all of a sudden that the number of Chaos Spawn that you can get balloons incredibly. And I think that is a extremely powerful tool to be able to utilize as Tzeentch, with the backing of your incredibly potent magic. And I kind of joked about it earlier about the whole, hey, every turn or every single battle from here on out, we're going to throw up Firestorm. But you can actually do that. Like, you can do that very effectively. If you're doing that, you might not want to go all of the Chaos Spawn in the world. You can paint them, obviously, with some resistances, but it might not work out as well. But I would definitely take, like, fire resistance. But that's just a concept, right? It doesn't have to be Firestorm. It could be, what's the air version? Lightning Field? No. It's Wrathful Skies, right? So you can throw up a storm, throw up Wrathful Skies, have 15 shock resistance on all your people, and just be like, fight me, bro. And you can do something like Wrathful Skies very easily. Very easily. And if you're running with the concept of all of your sacreds, or you're using all sacreds, right? Your acolytes sacred, your sorcerers sacred, your sorcerer lords sacred, and you've got some, tanky bless where your whole point is I'm just gonna sit here and survive. These guys have 22 fucking protection out of the gate. They're great at surviving. Fucking do it, right? Like, you've got great options to do exactly that. So those are kind of like the recommendations that I would say for Tzeentch. Really play into the magic. Probably look into High Fire so you can take advantage of summoning daemons or daemon princes and using the Chaos Spawn Cavalcade, which I think is really, really cost effective for what you're getting. And probably go at least good scales so that you can afford to have a shit ton of mages. Expansion is super easy for Tzeentch. You can, like we said, talked about when we were discussing units, you can, if you go a good bless, you can expand with chosen warriors or chosen knights. You just have to be careful of your dominion strength to make sure that you can actually get them, which presumably if you're going that strat, you're going to do that anyways because you want more of them. But alternatively, just expanding with Chaos Warriors is really, really easy. And alternatively, just shitting out Marauders is great. I think Chaos Warriors probably is the most effective in the long run because you're going to get promotions, you're going to get some chosen, you're going to get some Chaos Spawn, which I think is a pretty good boon. Transitioning from expansion into your first war, I think is really, really nice. But Marauders in a pinch are great at expanding. You can shit these guys out with decent scales. You can produce a crap ton of these every single turn, and they dominate. They do surprisingly well against everything. They do surprisingly well against heavy cav. They do surprisingly well against barbarians. Will they die? Yes, but they don't die in droves. They kill in droves. They hit hard, and they have decently tanky stats across the board. They're pretty fucking fantastic. Honestly, really, really recommend playing around with a fair amount of Marauders. And yeah, that's Tzeentch in a nutshell. I think the biggest things with them, I think the biggest thing with Tzeentch is probably the biggest thing about Sombre's Warhammer mod, period. And that is that the strong nations in this mod are incredibly strong. You're going to be able to do a lot of crazy, cool, and fun stuff as Tzeentch. So are the majority of the other nations. Now, there are a few of the nations in Sombre's mod that I think are weak or weaker than the majority of the other nations that kind of like need some TLC. That being said, I'm not an expert player, so I'm sure I could be like, oh, X nation feels weak, and other people would be like, they feel weak to you, but if you do X, Y, and Z, they slap. So take that with a grain of salt. But what I'm trying to convey is that Tzeentch looks and feels, goddamn cat, like they have a lot of really cool stuff. And that's because they do. But that does not make them invincible. Everyone else has a lot of really cool stuff in this mod too. And you need to be aware of that, or else it will you. So, I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the end of this video. This video, oh god, it's 20 minutes on just this section. This is going to be like a 3-hour video. If you manage to watch the entirety of this video, I say gods, Tzeentch bless you. But maybe don't take that, because Tzeentch blessings really don't tend to work out for most people. They tend to go horribly. So, maybe don't look at the ruinous powers for anything, and go play the Empire. Because there's heresy afoot or something. Bye-bye, everybody. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. It really helps me out. If you'd like to see me live, head over to my Twitch at twitch.tv/thedistanthorizon.